The maid turned to her mistress, noticing that she seemed very happy about the young master's return. The lady even began to sing and replied that of course she was very glad. She is going to greet him with a passionate kiss even if he doesn't like it. The maid sighed and noticed that Mr. Million was already a grown man. The lady asked again if she really still considered him a child since she was surprised by such an action. She added that this was her younger brother. He kept postponing the wedding, citing the fact that he lived far away and did not want to get married yet. For her part, she can no longer postpone the marriage because her parents have already prepared everything for the ceremony. It's good that her brother is returning right now. She wondered if he would be very upset that she was getting married first. As she sat in the carriage, she noticed that something was happening on the street. Looking out the window, she saw her father and mother racing on horseback somewhere in a hurry. At this time, the gentleman asked what had happened that made my lady so happy. The girl replied that her brother was returning today. The gentleman assumed that he was returning from the battlefield. She confirmed this, adding that it was also a stunning victory, and that was simply wonderful. The gentleman noticed that she really did have a lot of love for her brother. The lady sighed and said that he deserved to live knowing that he was loved. The gentleman stated that if that was the case, she simply had to introduce them. She talked about her brother so many times that he was willing to bet that she would recognize him at first sight. The lady smiled and admitted that she seemed to talk too much about him. The gentleman assured her that she should not worry because he was glad to see Lady Preya in any case. Then he turned to her with a question. Does her brother about whom she talks so often have blonde hair and red eyes? The lady confirmed this and added that he had simply incredible eyes. Some people think they are scary because they resemble the color of blood, but she thinks their shade is more like ruby. The gentleman thought for a moment and said that he perhaps understood why people saw something sinister in them. Preya didn't quite understand what he was talking about and looked at him questioningly. The gentleman explained that he was now looking at him as if he was about to cut his throat. Then she realized that her brother was already here and turned around. Turning around, she immediately jumped up from her chair and screamed his name. At that very moment, she threw herself into his arms, but he did not immediately respond in kind. She asked with delight when he managed to return. Million said that he had just arrived. Then he asked her what she was doing here. The girl was surprised by this question, deciding that he simply had not received the letter. She explained that she had a date and that this man was actually her fiancé. Hearing this, Million was horrified and asked again what she meant. He realized that this meant that she had dressed up for the sake of her fiancé. He looked at her carefully and suddenly extended his hand, letting down her hair. He said he was disappointed that she was trying for someone else and not for him. Then he took a strand of her hair and brought it to his face. He asked who dared to lay eyes on his sister. Preya didn't understand what was happening and looked at him in confusion. The guy put his hand on her waist and pulled her closer. She told him to stop and not to behave like that because Gladion was nearby. Million just asked what should he do. Preya pushed him away, saying that she did not understand his behavior at all. Then she asked what was wrong with someone paying attention to her. Million turned around and looked gloomily at her fiancé. He said he was too kind since he hadn't gouged out his eyes yet. Reuniting with her brother turned out to be nothing like Preya had imagined. 5 years ago, she was introduced to her younger brother Million, and they were introduced. Everyone hoped that they would become good friends. Preya decided to treat the boy with sweets. The mother noticed that Pri seemed to like him. The girl gave him her plate of cherries. From the first meeting, she liked him so much that she could hardly contain her joyful squeal. But the guy angrily asked why she gave him her dirty fork. He demanded an explanation. Was she deliberately trying to irritate him? The father frowned, called him a rascal, and asked why he was being rude to his sister. But the girl said that it was her own fault. After all, she had given him the fork she had already eaten with. She apologized to her brother and handed him a clean one. When he started eating, she suddenly thought he was very cute. Watching him, she thought it was simply amazing and wanted to eat like him. But she accidentally choked, and her mother immediately rushed to her. She asked worriedly if everything was okay, and decided that she had food stuck in her throat. Mother patted her on the back, and Pri immediately felt better. However, a piece of broccoli flew out of her mouth and landed right in Million's hair. Preya froze in horror, and the guy touched his head trying to understand what was on it. When he picked up the broccoli and saw what it was, his face twisted in disgust and he screamed. In panic, he jerked back accidentally, knocking over a servant from whose hands the dish fell. Million jumped up and exclaimed that this was an abomination. But getting up, he stepped right on the fallen dish and became even more angry. He slipped, lost his balance, and fell to the floor with a crash. Preya ran up to him and asked excitedly if he was hurt. She quickly apologized, but the guy irritably told her to speak more quietly. He stated that in such situations one must behave as calmly as possible. The girl tried to object, but he was categorically against it. Then she simply said that his nose was bleeding. News of the second wedding of Duke Edmure and her mother Marchioness Rachel spread quickly. The newspapers wrote that their romance was a great rarity in the high society of the empire. Many guests came to the ceremony. Previously, her family consisted of only her and her mother, but now she has a father and a brother. She couldn't contain her joy and was incredibly happy at the ceremony. True, she didn't understand why her brother kept his distance. It's been a long time since his mother died. Therefore, she firmly decided that she would definitely treat him well. Once during the wedding, he almost fell, but she managed to catch him. She happily reminded him that they were now brother and sister, but the guy coldly replied that he could not accept such a wealthy sister as she. Later, she found him sitting under a tree. He was surprised and did not understand how she found him, but the girl just brought him something to eat. She said that she washed these cherries especially for him. They were sweet and delicious, so she wanted to treat him, but the guy waved her off, threw the cherries aside, and told her to eat them herself. He didn't understand why she was always pestering him, but when he saw that she was sitting on the ground and crying, he became scared. He asked her to say at least something. The girl stood up, said everything was fine, and teased him a little. She laughed when she saw how he got caught and started to worry about her. This made the guy even more angry and told her to get out. Preya wondered why he was here alone. She noticed that there was nothing around, only the sound of crickets singing. The boy explained that this was exactly why he had run away here. He believed that everyone would be better off without him. Preya wondered why he thought that, and said that she enjoyed spending time with him just like many others. All people care about is his name Edmure. He doesn't want to hear them fawning over him. He finds this disgusting, so he avoids society. Now Preya understood everything. She realized that she was different from the others. She didn't try to get close to him because of his famous name. She wanted to say something but hesitated. The boy noticed this and asked again what she meant. He sat there in bewilderment, and the girl simply looked at the sky. Finally, she said that she liked him because he reminded her of Toto. The boy didn't understand right away and asked again. Preya repeated, "He looks like Toto." Then she explained that Toto was her toy bunny. She added that if you think about it, he's even cuter than Toto. The boy became embarrassed and asked again if she really thought so. Then he turned away, thinking that in time she too would begin to fear him. All that matters is his name, Edmure. Everyone would be better off without him. Preya lay in her bed and thought about these words. He said that sooner or later she would also begin to be afraid of him. She reached out to Toto and took him in her arms. Then she asked the rabbit if he knew her new last name. Now she had the same last name as her brother Million. Now she is Preya Rachel Edmure, which means her rabbit is Toto Edmure. But Toto thought she was too noisy and wondered how she could like that name so much. The girl froze in horror upon hearing this voice. She turned to the rabbit, confused and bewildered. The little hare said that he would soon go deaf because of her. He asked again how many times she would repeat the same thing. Preya rushed to him and said that he knew how much she wanted a normal family. Preya repeated once again that she was now Edmure. The bunny turned away and noted with displeasure that she had already said this 1,000,000 times. Toto's real name was Wind Shalamandra, and Preya loved this toy very much. He sighed and said that he understood her joy, but the Edmure name was somewhat dangerous. Preya was surprised and asked why he thought so. Toto replied that he was an ancient spirit and knew much more than she could imagine. He then added that people in their family reacted to blood in a special way and asked if she knew that their aura was red. The girl nodded and noted that red was a beautiful color. The more intense the aura of an Edmure family member, the stronger their reaction to blood. They cannot hide their excitement when they see blood. It puts them in a special state. There is nothing good about this. Dangerous people should not be around an innocent child. Preya frowned and asked Toto not to talk about her family like that. He shrugged and noted that he only spoke the truth, especially when it came to her brother. It was hard to believe that the current heir of the family had such power. Preya curiously asked if Million was really that strong. She was delighted, but Toto only sighed and called her a fool, explaining that it was not a compliment. He also added that she should stay away, because Million would soon find out about her powers. People like him had an unerring sense of their own kind. The girl thought about it and asked again if she was really that unusual. Toto looked at her as if she was stupid and reminded her that he was Wind Salamander. Does she really think she can just trap a spirit in a stuffed animal? If she thought she was ordinary, she was almost insulting him. But Preya shook her head and smiled. No, she didn't think so. He was just cute. For her, he will always be Toto. At that moment there was a knock on her door and she was informed that she had received a letter from the family of the Marchioness Leslie. Preya was surprised, but of course she allowed him to enter. The maid handed her the letter and, slightly embarrassed, noted that she had heard her mistress talking to someone. She thought the girl was probably just playing with a doll. Preya smiled and confirmed that she had been talking to Toto. Of course everyone thinks she's just chatting with her toy, it's her little secret. In the letter, the girl wrote that she hoped that Preya had already reached her new home and asked if she could visit her tomorrow. She also apologized for what had happened a few days ago. This surprised Preya. The letter had been sent 10 days ago, but it was so short as if written in a hurry. It sounded serious, so the girl thought about what happened that day. Then she also asked for forgiveness for being late. The girls met her with reproach, asking where she had disappeared to since everyone had already gathered. Preya happily rushed to Lena and Maria, apologizing for chatting with Million. The girls looked at each other and asked again who they were talking about. Preya was surprised. Was something really wrong? Lena hesitated, but still decided to say that she had heard something about her brother. Then, as if hesitating, she added that people were saying that Million had killed someone. Preya indignantly asked what they were talking about. The girl sighed and said that this was too much. If Million were part of her family, she would have acted differently. Rumor has it that bodies of unknown people are found in the Edmore estate from time to time, and everyone says that this is the work of Million Edmore. Preya clenched her fists and demanded to know if the girl was sure of her words. She shook her head and assured him that she was not lying. They had a servant working in their house who had previously served the Edmores, and it was she who told them this. Then Preya firmly stated that she wanted to see this maid right now. This caused Lena's indignation. Lena threw up her hands and said that Preya was too stubborn because they were just worried about her. Maria frowned and added that this was not right. She felt that Preya was being too rude to her friends who were worried about her, and this disappointed her. Preya sighed. She felt like it was them who were rude, not her. She asked if they even knew what day it was. The girls looked at each other and admitted that it was really sad. After all this was happening on the very day that Preya had a new family. Preya said outright that they were liars. If Lena really regretted it, she would have checked the truth of the rumors before saying them to her face. She should have at least tried to do it instead of mindlessly repeating other people's words. Lena frowned and asked again, did she really think that her words were not truthful enough? She looked offended. A second later, tears began to shine in her eyes, and soon she was crying. Preya felt awkward and tried to somehow diffuse the situation. The girls around immediately jumped up to Lena, concerned about her condition. They sympathized with her and were outraged by Preya's behavior. In their opinion, Lena was simply worried about her and Preya was behaving ungratefully. They demanded that she apologize to Lena. Preya didn't understand why everything turned against her. She simply told the truth. She was about to answer, but at that moment, someone's firm voice rang out, "I can't do this anymore." Preya turned around sharply and was surprised to see Million nearby. Now she realized that he had heard everything. That was the last thing she wanted. The guy looked at her and calmly told the brunette to raise her head. Then he firmly said that the maid did not see human bodies. They were the corpses of demonic animals, and if she hadn't run away when she was put to cleaning, she would have realized that she was wrong. The girl sobbed even louder. It seemed that now she understood everything. Maria intervened, demanding that Million stop. There were no demonic animals in the capital, so why was he lying? She looked at him with incomprehension, but the guy only glared at her coldly. Then he added that the maid was indeed right about one thing. It was he who cut them up. Maria said that she missed Pri very much. This irritated her terribly, so she just nodded in displeasure in response. They had never been so close before Maria brought her irises and said that she couldn't come empty-handed. She then noticed the service and asked if she could find out what it was, but was told that it belonged to their family. Million had cruelly mocked her. Preya expected to be overcome with rage or at least irritation, but unexpectedly for herself she did not give in to emotions. Whatever it means, it seems that Maria was deceived as well. The story has not been verified. Maria didn't understand why Preya was so surprised, because she knew that Lena had an inferiority complex. It was simply ridiculous of her to act as if she were an important person like a countess or a marchioness. Preya, however, didn't quite understand what was funny. She agreed that she hadn't expected Lena to do such a thing, but she had definitely crossed the line. Maria noticed that Preya was too soft with her. In any case, Lena left their company that same day, so one could forget about this girl. At that moment, the fork fell from Preya's hands. Maria was confused, not understanding what was happening to her. Preya was surprised by how easily Maria called Lena hanging and why she spoke so indifferently about the one she considered a friend. Maria then added that she was hosting a tea party at the castle this week and hoped her friend would join. Preya replied that she was not planning to appear in society, for now she needed to rest a little. Maria noted that she had already been resting for 10 days. Preya asked again if she had anything else to say. Preya then asked Maria if she thought a simple apology and a letter was enough. She shrugged and said that she had already written that she was apologizing and did not understand what else was wanted from her. Preya said it didn't sound like a sincere apology at all, and she didn't believe Maria was asking for forgiveness from the heart. Preya tried to explain to Maria how she should behave. If it hadn't been for her mother's remarriage, Rachel would never have been above her in life. With the strong support of the Edmore family, Rachel now stands taller, and Preya couldn't understand what she had done to deserve such good fortune. Maria specifically wanted to use the opportunity to exclude Lena from their club. However, the young Count Edmure appeared and stopped her, but Preya behaved like an innocent angel, and Maria did not understand why she suddenly became so cruel. If it weren't for her father, Maria wouldn't have been able to come here at all, but she still asked for forgiveness. Preya replied that she accepted her apology. And if St. Mary really wants Preya to throw a wild party, she'll have to invite Lena too. Maria was indignant and said that she would never do that. Then Preya calmly replied that in that case she simply would not go. Maria yelled at her, but Preya coldly reminded her to call her Preya Edmore, not Preya Rachel. She also added that she hopes that from now on Maria will pronounce her name correctly. If Maria had nothing more to say, she could go home. Preya approached the maid and said that Maria was about to leave, asking her to accompany the girl. Finally, Preya said that she was expecting good news from Maria. After some time, another letter arrived from Maria Leslie. In it, she said that she agreed to invite Lena to a tea party. Preya knew she had been a bit strict that day. Sure, she was feeling down, but she wasn't going to pander to Maria's wishes or change her mind. She seems to be too kind to her friends. The maid came to Milady and informed her that the Duke and Duchess were expecting her. Preya said she would be right there and thought about it. It was the first time they had called her to talk face to face. She wondered what they wanted to say. As she approached them, she heard a greeting from her mother. Her father told her to go through, and Preya was glad. It seemed no one was going to scold her. However, she was interested in the man who came with them. The woman who introduced herself as Break Husson said she was pleased to meet Lady Preya. She would be her mentor in elven magic. Hearing this, Preya was in real shock. The mother explained that she wanted to invite a mentor immediately after the wedding, but was only able to do so now. The girl thought it was a secret, but her mother said it was time to reveal it. The woman turned to Milady and remarked that in her opinion there was a spirit in this toy. Preya tried to avoid the conversation, but the rabbit told her not to pretend and just ask. She didn't even think that being in a toy irritated him so much. He couldn't hold back and kept talking. The woman asked if she could take him for a while, and Preya agreed. The rabbit began to scream, demanding to be released immediately. It was a wind spirit, but he claimed that he was not just a wind spirit. The woman asked if he was really that old and had been around for centuries. The girl assumed that she had already roughly understood his abilities. Tomorrow she and the lady would conduct the first lesson, but the rabbit screamed that he had not finished yet and began to riot. It was completely unclear what he had done. Preya was shocked. She had never seen a water spirit before. The woman used him to calm the rabbit down a little. Now it was clear why he had a foul smell of rotten water. That meant she was a water spirit. The woman asked in surprise if he was really talking about her. Preya tried to calm Toto down, and the woman tried to calm Marina down. Marina complained that Mrs. Ray was always unhappy with her. The woman apologized to the rabbit for disturbing her. He was surprised and asked how she knew his name. The woman said that times had changed, but she had once been a member of a spirit association and had gathered a lot of information about him. However, first of all, she wanted to disturb him for a while. Preya didn't quite understand what was being discussed, but after the woman's touch, all the fatigue she had been struggling with suddenly receded and a lightness appeared in her body. The woman then asked how long the contract was. It seemed that she was having more difficulty moving around lately and was tripping a lot. Preya wondered how she knew about it since she was indeed falling more and more often and sleeping a lot. The woman noticed that Preya seemed to have been forcing herself to do this for a long time. Then she asked if the girl was experiencing any discomfort. Preya's soul was purer than that of an ordinary person, so she only felt tired, and her contract with the spirit should not have ended yet. After the contract is concluded, the soul of the person and the spirit are linked. Usually, the contract shortens the years allotted to the person because the powerful energy of the spirit greatly harms the human soul. However, it seems that Sir Wind does everything possible not to harm it. The rabbit agreed that the woman was right. Since Preya knew nothing about such things, all she could do was intuitively build the right interactions. Perhaps she really did have extraordinary abilities. The mother was shocked. The woman noted that they had done the right thing by inviting her. If she had hesitated, their daughter's life could have been in danger. The Duchess suspected that this connection could be dangerous, but she did not think that it was so serious. Now she was thinking about how to attract the attention of the Spirit Association. The woman assured that she was not to blame. People who are not initiated into the secrets of spirits do not realize what a destructive influence they can have. In any case, she was glad to serve the Edmore family. She knew that their request might seem unreasonable, but she was still grateful for their trust and was ready to help. Everyone was counting on her. However, the woman said that there was nothing to thank her for. Frankly, it was even good that they had hidden the young lady's abilities until now. She also asked them not to worry. With her help, Preya could become a powerful sorcerer, and perhaps even the Spirit Association would begin to fear her. Now he didn't have to hide his secret from Toto, and it was like a weight off his shoulders. Outside the castle, you can't tell anyone, of course, but inside you don't have to pretend anymore. It will seem strange at first, but then everyone will get used to it. She really wanted to tell Million about this, but she had no idea when he would return. Looking out the window, she accidentally noticed a carriage and immediately realized that her brother was there. When he came out, she was delighted and rushed towards him. But the boy remarked with disdain that she should not run. If she tripped and fell again, it would not be very good. But Preya didn't listen to him. Having already run up, she immediately hugged her brother and began to bombard him with questions about why he returned so late. She asked why he had been gone for so long, which made the boy a little embarrassed. He replied that in fact he had not been absent for that long, and she should not interfere in his affairs. She said that it was unpleasant for her to hear this because she had waited for him for so long, but in response he simply thrust a bundle into her hands. It turned out not to be a briefcase, but simply a package with things, and Preya was immediately delighted. She thanked him, but Million just waved her off, saying that there was nothing to thank her for. He was buying things anyway, so he took something for her on the way. He may not have bought them specifically for her, but he still thought of her in the end. She invited him to go with her, and then suddenly realized that she had completely forgotten to tell him about that very thing. The rabbit was surprised that she remembered only after a day, but she was so glad that Million bought her cherries. By the way, she wondered where he ran off to early this morning. She also asked him if he thought he would be leaving again soon. It was so hard to see her brother's tired face. The servant informed the lady that Brake was already here and asked her to follow him. There was no light here, so she had to be careful. Preya wondered why they were going underground when they had a garden that was specially made for training. It was spacious, protected, and smelled nice of herbs. Wasn't there enough space? She felt like a real explorer because it was dark and cool all around, and the walls were smooth as if they had been polished by magic. The rabbit was panting and muttering something about the lack of fresh air. The man said that this place is directly connected to the Edmore Castle. The young master trains here. Preya was surprised to hear this. Did Million really come here to train? Brake calmly noted that something like this was to be expected from the Edmores. It took a lot of mana stones to create such a space, and the family had plenty of them. They made a fortune from it. The girl wondered, if they had the opportunity they could ask Lang about everything connected with this family. Preya thought about it because he obviously knew more about the Edmores than he was saying. The man confirmed her suspicions. He had been working for them for many years and could explain everything they needed. After that, he added that he needed to leave for a while, but to call him when they were done. Brake decided that before she began training, she would show Pri how to interact with spirits. She made a smooth hand gesture, and something like ripples of water appeared in the air. The water spirit appeared, looked at the girl, and said with a slight smile that she had heard about her great soul. It seemed that many spirits had been following her lately, as if something was attracting them. However, Toth was indignant and immediately ordered the water spirit to leave. He said with an offended look that he was the only spirit of Preya. The girl thought. She really had never seen other spirits. The water spirit thought she was just guiding the other spirits. However, the rabbit insisted that there was no other choice in this case. If the child signed the contract without preparation, he would die. The water spirit mockingly remarked that someone here resembled an old man who had lived too long. She expressed doubt that he understood how everything worked and asked what century he was in. The rabbit got furious and asked who she called a decrepit old man. Their argument continued, and the rabbit added that she was lucky he was stuck in a toy, otherwise he would not have restrained himself. Brake tried to intervene and told Marina that she was not there to start a fight, but the water spirit did not even listen to her words and continued to ignore her. Brake asked Milady how she first met the rabbit. The girl replied that it happened on a cold day when she was walking through the forest of Israya, watching the autumn leaves. Suddenly a strong wind blew, and it was at that moment that Toto spoke. It was in the dawn days of the wind spirit's power. Brake thought that the girl might have said the key word unintentionally. Preya thought about it and admitted that she didn't remember anything about that moment. Brake explained that such words can be difficult, and that the main word leaves an imprint on the spirit, but only she remembers it. There are currently no spirits who could know this word. To be more precise, it is hidden and cannot be found or understood, even if one tries. Prey's stuffed rabbit asked what the strange word meant before he fell asleep. He was deeply absorbed in learning the meaning of words and wanted to understand what it could mean. The woman who taught Preya noted that the Spirit Association had long been destroyed, and all research materials that could help sort things out had disappeared many years ago. Preya was shocked. The only words that ran through her mind were apple cider and lemon cider. She wondered if she should drink lemon cider after her workout, not knowing what was in store for her. Rabbit asked again if the Spirit Association was some kind of spiritual faction. Brake replied that she didn't know how it was before, but now the spirit sages treat the spirits as their property. During the research, a new theory was discovered. The first study was devoted to how to protect spirits from humans. This discovery became the basis for future actions in the spirit world. Previously, spirits and spiritual kings often became victims of magicians who used their powers. If spirits were previously protected, then over time they began to be subjugated and bound. But the situation changed. Many researchers tried to leave the Spirit Association, but those who remained did not hesitate to destroy them and eliminate any threats, including research materials that could expose them. The rabbit admitted with horror that the world had gone mad. He had been asleep for a long time, and now he could hardly understand how much the world had changed. Preya was almost sent to one of the most dangerous places, which frightened him. The wind spirit, whom Rabbit called an old man, said that he did not understand anything about the modern world. Preya felt that this was due to the association of spirits and realized that this was indeed a bad place. The water spirit confirmed that if she encountered anyone from this association, it was best to stay away. The association was clearly targeting her spirit, and she had no doubt that this place was dangerous. Preya realized that the Spirit Association was a really bad place, but Brake suggested leaving all that behind. It was important to learn how to work with spirits, and to do that, you need to start with training. Preya declared herself ready. After a few hours of training, Brake praised her, saying that she had done well, and that was enough for today. Preya was proud of herself for her successful start. The rabbit noticed that Preya was very tired, having given it her all. The The girl admitted that she had tried too, but still did not understand what she was doing wrong because her communication was wrong. Preya said that she understood that it was a cure for fatigue. Just then, Million, her brother, came up to her. He was nearby, but she did not notice him at first. Preya was very surprised to see her brother, although Million himself did not even pay attention to her at first. He only politely asked what she was doing there. The girl told her brother that she hadn't seen him all day. She left everything else for later, specifying that she was just training there. She was still a little confused. Preya immediately ran to Million, but he quickly stopped her, telling her not to come closer. He was covered in the monster's blood, and the girl froze, not knowing how to react. Preya was shocked to realize that her brother, still a small child, could handle such a monster. Million explained that he was drunk on blood now, and that changed everything. The spirit rabbit noted that he needed to think about how to stop staring so defiantly at the blood. Even monsters had their limits, and this seemed to be irritating him greatly at the moment. Million said that he was right in his guess, and added that it was clearly a spirit. Everything became clear, and he immediately realized that this was not just a rabbit. Preya asked in surprise how her brother knew the rabbit was a spirit. Million replied that he often heard a strange noise in the wind, and this clued him to the true nature of the creature. The rabbit noted with some satisfaction that he had expected such a reaction from the Edmore family. His slightly strong senses allowed him to easily guess that this was not just a toy. He greeted the woman who trained Preya. She greeted him back and remarked that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. This was clearly not a coincidence since they hadn't met for a long time. The boy said he had to go, but Preya tried to stop him. She felt her heart clench and couldn't get rid of the thought of his loneliness. It wouldn't leave her. He ignored her words and walked away. Preya wondered why her brother always looked so lonely. There was always that look in his eyes, like something unsaid. Back in her room, Preya carefully placed the stuffed rabbit on her bed. At that moment, the toy came to life and asked if she really wanted to go where she was going. Preya began to prepare. She carefully chose her clothes, preparing herself for the upcoming events. This was an important moment, and she felt that she had to be ready for anything. She told the rabbit with confidence that she was going to screw it all the way. Preya felt she couldn't back down, despite the warnings that surrounded her. Rabbit, meanwhile, was wary of the fact that he had a bad feeling about this. He knew that whenever Preya was so serious, something unexpected always happened. He admitted that he couldn't stay there, but Preya reassured him, saying that if she took him with her, Maria would definitely not let her go. It was her only way to cope. She said goodbye to him, but knew she couldn't take the rabbit with her. Preya felt like her decision was the right one, but she still couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Despite her words, the rabbit was still not calm. When Preya approached, she was introduced. There was something strange about this moment, but she decided to go further. Some of the people present were strangers to her, while others were former members of her entourage. Preya felt a strange tension, as if it was important, but she couldn't figure out why. When Maria saw her, she was delighted, and with a smile invited Preya to come in. It was somehow unexpected, but despite everything, Preya felt relieved and stepped inside. As Maria promised, Elena was there too, but she wasn't sitting in the front row. It was a bit strange because she was always expected to be in the very center, in the epicenter of attention. Maria couldn't help but notice that Preya was late and asked curiously what had kept her. She had already managed to wait for a long time and asked the girl to sit next to her as always. Preya greeted everyone, looking around the room. She noticed that it had been a long time since they had last seen each other, and everything around her had changed in that time. She shared that she is still getting used to the new circumstances. There were things that still didn't seem normal, but she is confident that she can cope with it. Preya hesitated for a moment, then continued. They still didn't know each other, so she decided to find out the names of the ladies sitting next to her. Preya did not sit next to Maria, who, slightly offended, interrupted her. Maria introduced the girl who was sitting next to her and said that this was Erica from the Frederin family. They became counts. Preya felt that maybe Maria was feeling awkward now. After all, she hadn't sat next to her. Maria was even interrupting everyone, which was a bit rude and inappropriate. Preya turned to Erica and remarked that if her family had become earls, it meant they had found the legendary treasure island. This seemed like an exciting and wonderful discovery. Erica smiled and confirmed that it was true. Their family had indeed discovered a stunning island. Preya was delighted and immediately began asking if she had visited the place. Erica explained that she had not yet been to this treasure island, but her family often travels to other places. This amazing adventure continued in other parts of the world. Preya began enthusiastically saying that it was really great to travel like this. She asked if Erica liked to travel because it must be exciting. Erica confessed that she loved to travel and suggested that Preya visit their castle. There her father has a whole collection of maps and artifacts that he collected during his expeditions. Preya was delighted and curiously asked if it would really be possible to see everything. While they were not discussing this issue, Maria suddenly decided to shout out why the tea tasted so terrible. After this, Maria poured the tea, deliberately attracting attention, and curiously asked the maid if she would now be deprived of tea forever because of its bad taste. The maid, confused, apologized to Milady and assured her that she would immediately prepare new tea to suit her taste preferences. Maria complained that she expected the tea to taste better, but this one was too bad. She expressed dissatisfaction, not understanding how this could happen. She began to wonder where the maid had found such a terrible tea. Preya decided to intervene and ask Maria what was wrong with the drink and why she was so unhappy. Maria asked again what Preya was talking about, saying that she was fine, but Preya was taking things too seriously. This, by the way, was bad for her skin. She wasn't moisturizing it enough. Preya suggested asking the others if everyone was unhappy with the tea, or if it was just someone overreacting to everything that was happening around them. Maria, now furious, began to shout that everything was too confusing. She asked what Preya was actually doing and what she had done to her hair that had caused such a storm of emotions. Preya tried to calm Maria down, asking her to watch her words. She wanted her not to take everything so seriously and to express her thoughts calmly. Maria asked with fury in her voice if she should now sit and watch every word she said, that Pre should worry about her behavior, not about who was in charge. Preya was furious. Not only was Maria unhappy with her, but now she was dragging her assistant into this. This was too much, even for Preya. She felt her anger growing. Maria continued to shout loudly at Preya. She finally stopped, looked at her and said furiously that she hoped Preya had already said everything she had to. Then Maria turned abruptly and headed straight for Preya. One of the ladies tried to intervene to come and stop her, but Maria seemed determined. Quarrels and fights broke out suddenly, although they all behaved in a restrained, edifying manner. Like noble personalities in reality, each of them was an ordinary person with emotions. Preya was sure that everyone else would be on Maria's side. She knew how many people believed and supported her, and she had no doubt that her own words would not be able to influence the outcome. But at that moment, Preya, unable to restrain herself, grabbed Maria by the hair. This was unexpected for everyone, and no one could immediately understand how to react to her behavior. The girl, shocked by such an act, cried out in surprise, "What the hell are you doing?" She could not believe that Preya had taken such a step, rudely violating all boundaries. Maria continued to scream, demanding that Preya let go of her hair, but Preya only smiled and calmly replied that she would let her go only when she wanted to. Preya continued to hold her despite Maria's screams, who in turn accused Preya of madness and continued to pull her hair, trying to break free. Preya, without hiding her irony, provoked a conflict. She told Maria to try to hit her and assured her that if she did, she would remember that it was not worth touching crazy people. Maria begged her to let go, but Preya calmly stated that she would not let go until her arms were tired. She was not going to show weakness. At this point, the other ladies, seeing the mess, rushed to call the butler. Preya sensed that the situation was becoming serious and realized that their actions could have consequences. After Preya let go of Maria, she simply collapsed to the floor, her strength completely exhausted. This moment was extremely difficult for her, and she could not move on. Preya threw her head back and said calmly that Maria must not be seen again, otherwise there could be unpleasant consequences. There was determination in her voice. Preya knew that one day everything would become clear, and then everyone would understand who the vile and hypocritical Shalashovka really was. Maria shouted after her, accusing her of madness. Calmly but confidently, Preya replied that it was Maria who was deviating from the norm, and next time the girls should take care of themselves. There was a hidden reproach and warning in her words. Everyone around was stunned by her words. Maria started screaming, claiming that Preya considered herself some kind of noble lady, but despite this, she could not hide her displeasure. Shocked, Preya heard the Count's daughter say that she thought she was pretty cool. When Maria heard this, her face twisted in surprise, and she repeated the question, not believing her ears. Soon, Maria, unable to bear the tension, kicked everyone out. She ordered everyone to leave the place immediately, as if hoping to get rid of their presence once and for all. Preya couldn't remember exactly when or how those scratches appeared on her hands, but at the time it didn't seem important because the main thing was that she had won the argument. A picture of her grandfather came into Preya's mind. He was bald and always paid attention to details like the hair on his enemies. It was a perfect victory for her, but something was troubling her. The thought of Lady Erica popped into her head. Preya hoped that the girl had understood everything correctly, and she would have to make sure to send her a letter later to complete everything. After all the events, Preya went home. She quickly left almost without looking back, feeling the tension leave her body despite her fatigue. She knew that if her parents saw her hands, she would be in trouble. She had to be careful to avoid unpleasant consequences because they did not forgive such things. Preya had no doubt that there would be talk in high society if her mother found out about the incident with Leslie, but she didn't care. She felt relieved despite everything. Already on the way home, Preya began to doubt her actions. Maybe she did the wrong thing because her anger was too strong, but at the same time she could not stop thinking. Preya decided that she needed to quickly find some ointment in her room and head back to her room. She felt that there was a little pain in the area on her arm and she needed to do something. As soon as she entered the room, a voice asked her what she was doing there. Preya stopped and realized it was her brother Million, but he seemed to be worried about something. She was surprised when she saw him. Million was standing in the doorway, his face full of excitement. He looked like something was bothering him, and he was obviously looking for his sister. Million started to cry when he noticed that she had hurt herself somewhere. Preya quickly hid the wound, saying that everything was fine so that he wouldn't worry. She didn't want to worry him more than necessary. But Million immediately noticed something strange. He said that he came here because he smelled his sister's delicious scent, and it somehow made him wary. Preya couldn't understand what he was talking about. The girl looked at him in surprise and replied that she had not worn perfume today. However, Million clarified that the smell he was smelling was not from perfume but from blood. This confused him. Preya was even more confused, not understanding how blood could smell good. She didn't know that her blood could make her brother feel that way. It all felt a little off. Preya laughed a little, saying that if someone saw that look, they would think they were going to be eaten. She couldn't understand how blood could be connected to something so strange, but she still decided to ask Million what brought him here. He answered with a smile that he just came as if nothing unusual had happened, but his gaze was still tense. When Preya raised her hand, Million noticed something that immediately put him on guard. He fell silent, focusing on her hand, as if trying to figure out what was going on, but not knowing how to properly respond. Preya quickly ran up to him and screamed that his hand was all bloody. She was in a panic and couldn't believe her eyes when she saw how badly her brother was hurt. Preya looked around and noticed that there was a bloody sword nearby which could not help but attract her attention. It was cut and had clearly been used in battle, which left questions. Million told her not to touch the sword, to which Preya, looking surprised, asked what it was. She thought the sword belonged to him, but her assumptions were wrong. The boy quietly explained that Edmures were not so easy to kill. Preya could not help but notice that even if he remained alive, he would definitely receive serious injuries and would take a long time to recover. She continued to ask him about what he had been doing and what had happened to his hand. She noticed that he looked strange and nervous, clearly trying to hide something important. Million replied that he was fine and that he just needed to wait a little. According to him, the wound would heal soon and nothing terrible had happened, although he was clearly not sure. Preya, not understanding why he was so calm about what was happening, asked him again why he was saying that her anxiety increased, and she found it difficult to believe his assurances. He added quietly that he deserved this curse, not hiding his guilt. Preya couldn't believe that her brother treated himself like this, and her heart sank with pain. Million noticed that his sister would soon start to fear him, which added even more anxiety to her soul. It was as if he was predicting the future, and this frightened Preya even more. Preya, overcome with horror, asked her brother what he was talking about. Why should she be afraid of him? These words seemed like a prophecy, and she could not understand how all this could be reality. She asked him again to relax his hand, which she thought was bleeding. Everyone around him was telling him that he needed to take care of himself, but he continued to ignore them. Million admitted that he was afraid of himself, that his condition was getting worse, and this only confirmed his words. He knew that he was not in the best condition, and this scared him. He told her that he was afraid of her, and Preya was in complete shock. How was that possible? His words made her freeze, and when he started to fall, she felt real fear. Preya, not understanding what was happening to her brother, panicked and asked what had happened to him. His condition was terrible, and she could not understand what could have weakened him so much. Flustered, she asked him to wake up, shaking his shoulder. Her voice trembled with worry, and her soul was lost in anxiety, as if she could do nothing to help. It seemed like he was just asleep, but she quickly realized that it was more of a faint than a dream. He had lost consciousness, and she didn't know how to help him in this state. Preya realized that she needed to tend to his wound as soon as possible. She knew that if the maid saw her brother in such a state, the consequences would be catastrophic. However, to her surprise, when she looked at his hand, the wound had disappeared as if it had never been there. It was so strange that she couldn't believe her eyes. Preya was shocked by what was happening. She looked at her brother, trying to understand what this meant. Only questions were spinning in her head, but there were no answers. She noticed that the boy, despite his helplessness, was quietly crying. His words about his mother in this state seemed completely absurd to her, and this made her even more wary. During the classes, Preya began to master the ability to control the power of the wind. She tried to focus on her task to achieve better results. It was not easy, but she tried determinedly. Break, her mentor, told her that in order to succeed, she needed to be fully focused. Preya understood that this was important and tried to do her best in the task. At one point, Preya wondered if she and her brother had seen anyone they knew, like the Duke or his maid. They, as usual, had not expressed any surprise. This was usual for her brother. Million often cursed himself and was afraid of his actions. Preya wondered why he reacted like that. She couldn't understand what was happening, and she didn't understand why he was afraid of himself. Sometimes he called for their mother in his sleep, and this made Preya worried. She decided to seek advice from Break, hoping that the teacher could shed some light on what was going on with her brother. Preya asked Break if she had ever met the late Duchess. This was an important question for Preya, as she felt there was something hidden in her family's past that she wanted to understand. Break replied that she knew the Duchess, but asked with interest why Preya was interested in her past. Preya replied that she simply wanted to know what the Duchess was like, her lifestyle and character. The teacher thought for a moment and explained that the Duchess was just an ordinary person. This was unusual for the Edmore family, which always valued outstanding individuals, and Preya could not fully understand what it meant. Preya always felt too ordinary, especially in her family. They had a very strong pedigree, but she didn't seem to fit into that context, although there is nothing wrong with being ordinary. The teacher was a little surprised to see how Preya responded to this topic. She thought that the girl probably had never heard of such things before, which was quite strange for her age. The teacher advised to continue the lessons, although Preya was clearly upset. She had many questions that she hoped to get answers to, but the lessons had to continue. Preya felt her thoughts slipping away. It was hard to concentrate, but it would be better to pretend nothing had happened and not show her concern. Despite what had happened, her brother Million had said nothing since that day. He was silent, which was even stranger to her, because they always shared their thoughts with each other. It seemed as if an invisible wall had formed between them, which was difficult to break down. Preya felt that they were drifting apart, and she could not understand what was causing it. When they arrived, Preya was filled with delight. Looking down the alley, she felt her heart fill with joy. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She was looking forward to the picnic that awaited them. Everything seemed perfect for enjoying time with family, and Preya was happy that this moment had finally arrived. Mother warned Preya to be careful, especially when the children wanted to go a little further. The parents also told them not to run too far so that they could stay close and not lose sight of each other. Preya's husband asked her if she had learned anything new. Mother calmly replied that the incident had been connected with the rebels and was probably not an accident. The unpleasant moment came when he realized that he would disturb his wife again. All this was too serious for him not to be concerned about the consequences and not to worry about it anymore. Preya spoke confidently. She was sure of her words. She believed that behind every action there was not just a technique, but something more, some kind of force or spirit that supported it all. Million noticed that they were acting much more harmoniously than he had expected. His wife in turn responded that within certain limits, they did everything competently and intelligently. The husband wondered if the queen herself knew about this. Even if there were informants among her people, it would be extremely difficult to tell her about all this, and she would hardly believe it. But even if the information had reached the queen, it would still have been impossible to convey to her the full picture. It would only have deepened her anxiety and added to her worries about unconfirmed rumors. The Duke continued to pretend that he knew nothing, as if it did not concern him. The husband asked how much time they needed to settle everything, hoping for a quick solution. His wife suggested that he just watch they hadn't swallowed the spoon as she had initially assumed, but if you look at it from the other side, the game could drag on for much longer. His wife asked him what he was talking about, noting that she thought he was engrossed in the game. She didn't understand what he was trying to tell her, because he still seemed to enjoy being involved in the process. He replied that the game was certainly interesting, but he had other thoughts. He simply felt sorry for the children who would hardly understand what was going on and would have to deal with it later. His wife tried to calm him down, saying that the children would understand everything when they grew up. Moreover, these were all just the queen's orders, and there was no way to refuse them. It was true. After all, such an act could destroy his wife, but it was impossible to refuse. He could not simply leave her without knowing how she would cope. The Duchess said with sincere regret that she felt very sorry for her daughter. She was so happy because she had a real family that no one could take away from her. Suddenly, the sky became overcast and a heavy rain began. The maid immediately ran up with an umbrella, trying to protect the gentleman from the wet drops and the cold wind that quickly covered them. The Duchess began to look around restlessly, and her voice became alarmed. She asked where their children were now. Couldn't they see them close by? Couldn't they feel their presence? The Duke also began to feel nervous, his eyes quickly searching for the children within sight. He realized that they were not around, and anxiety gradually began to take hold of his heart. Meanwhile, Preya was in the water. It seemed that she was about to drown her body helplessly, plunging into the turbulent currents. She did not know how to swim, and panic seized her soul. Brother Million noticed that they seemed to have gone too far from safety. He felt that they should not have gone so far, but it was too late. Preya was in a panic, screaming, not understanding what was happening to them. Her screams echoed throughout the surrounding area, but she could find no answer to her fear and confusion. When they left Vlad, they found an abandoned house. Its walls and roof were already old, but it could be a good shelter from the rain. Preya suggested hiding there. They sat under the eaves of an abandoned house, trying to shelter from the rain. Water dripped from the roof onto the ground, creating the feeling that the whole world was now in a cold and dark element. The feeling of cold was growing stronger. The rain did not stop, and the drops, cold as ice, penetrated their clothes. They tried to warm themselves, but nature was stronger than their efforts. Million said with surprise that he thought that was exactly what she wanted: rain and cold that could force them to seek shelter and be alone in silence under the protection of the old house. Preya was shaking all over, and she couldn't understand why so much. Was it the cold that was getting under her clothes, or the fatigue that was pressing on her shoulders, or maybe the fear that was squeezing her heart? It was so cold around that even her breath felt icy. In addition, her stomach had been aching from hunger for a long time, and she felt her strength slowly leaving her. Million, noticing her condition, reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, clutched in his palm. He looked at his sister as if deciding whether to give it away. It turned out to be a magic stone. Preya took it gratefully, feeling the warmth coming from it. She looked at her brother and asked if he was cold without it. Million just shrugged and looked away, saying that he was fine. If that was what she wanted, she could use the stone herself, but she knew he always said that even when he was suffering, Then she noticed that he was shaking too, although he was trying to hide it. Million's cheeks turned slightly pink as if he was embarrassed that his sister had figured him out. He frowned, asking what she was doing. As Preya moved closer cautiously, she decided she wouldn't leave him to freeze alone. The girl explained that if they sit next to each other, they will warm up. It is warmer together and they will definitely not freeze. The brother grimaced, saying that she was too sticky. He wasn't the type to give out hugs so easily, and anyway, he wouldn't die of cold so easily. Preya was shocked. He was definitely a boy. What kind of nonsense was he talking? Did it matter whether he died or not? Even if he doesn't die, it's still cold. How can you just endure it if there's a way to make it at least a little warmer? Million just sighed and said he was simply stating a fact he wouldn't die, but Preya was irritated that he spoke of death so easily as if it meant nothing. If that was the case, she said that it would be better for him to use the mana stone himself rather than give it to her. Preya just waved her hand, assuring him that there was no need to worry about her. In the worst case, she said she would just get sick, but that was okay. She was used to this state. The boy frowned and asked her not to try to force herself to overcome it. However, Preya only shook her head, noting that he shouldn't push himself to exhaustion either. She suggested another option. She suggested that they hold hands and leave the stone between their palms. That way, she reasoned, they could use it together without overburdening either of them. The boy didn't answer at first. His gaze was thoughtful, but after a few moments he nodded, agreeing with her proposal. They sat next to each other, holding the stone between their palms, and after some time the boy asked if it was true that she was not going to ask him about what happened then. Preya just looked at him, not rushing to answer. Then, narrowing her eyes slightly, she asked, if she asked this question, would he really give an honest answer? At that moment, the boy realized that the hair spirit had not told her anything. Apparently, he had decided not to interfere and to keep this secret to himself. Preya frowned indignantly. She was even more frightened, not by the fact that he was hiding something, but by the fact that he called Tot simply the spirit of the hair and not by his name. He just shrugged and agreed indifferently. Whatever his name was, he didn't care. Then he asked with a grin how many more times she would correct him. She wanted to say something, but suddenly realized that this smile suited him. She even froze for a moment, noticing how his face changed when he smiled. He suddenly returned to their previous conversation, reminding her that he had problems with controlling his power. The girl nodded without thinking, confirming that she remembered. That day, even the magical beast couldn't quench his thirst. It was strange and unusual, because usually he could hold back. But today he was drawn to something different, strong and irresistible. Preya curiously asked why he didn't just drink water. She thought it would help since thirst was just thirst, and it made sense to quench it in the most obvious way. However, the brother only shook his head and replied that it was not that simple. Ordinary water would not solve the problem because he reacted strongly to blood and his thirst was of a completely different kind. Hearing this, the girl suddenly remembered Thoth's words. The rabbit said that the Edmore family reacts to blood in a special way, and at that moment she guessed he had hurt himself. Million confirmed her guess. His thirst for blood was much stronger than his father's, and he could not stop. He knew that his blood was useless, but the desire to see it did not disappear. Pre felt uneasy. She realized that he had cut his hand just for the sake of it. It was scary to realize that he hadn't been able to stop himself, even knowing the pointlessness of it. The girl turned to her brother and asked if it was true that her blood smelled delicious to him. He honestly admitted that this was the main problem that he could not ignore. He had never experienced such a reaction to human blood before, and he had never met anyone who was as strong as him, or perhaps even stronger than him. His father had told him that he was stronger than him, but Million had never seen him react to his own wounds. This surprised Preya, and she asked how her father was supposed to react to them. The brother explained that he had felt the urge to kill magical animals, but he had never felt anything like that towards humans. It was a new and frightening emotion for him. So when he caught the scent of her blood, he probably wanted to kill her. Million said this calmly, but these words made Preya shudder. The boy looked at her carefully, slightly tilting his head to the side, as if assessing her reaction. Then, with visible interest, he asked, what was she going to do if he confirmed her guess? Preya froze, a multitude of thoughts running through her head. Did he really want to kill her? She saw no malice or hostility in his eyes, but rather a strange curiosity, as if he simply wanted to smell her blood. Instead of being scared, the girl suddenly smiled. She calmly stated that it just meant that she should train harder. After all, if she became stronger, no one would be able to kill her. The boy frowned clearly, not fully understanding what she meant by that. Preya explained that her teacher Break was sure that one day she could become a great sorceress, and that meant that having gained strength and experience, she would no longer be afraid of anyone. After all, the strong are not touched. The strong decide for themselves how to live. The guy chuckled, shaking his head. It sounded stupid to him. She knew she was going to get killed and she was still thinking about training. He said irritably that she shouldn't be talking such nonsense. No matter how hard she tried, it wouldn't do any good. But Preya just shrugged and said that you never know without trying. He snorted again, but then calmly added that she shouldn't worry because he had no intention of killing her. However, he added a little more thoughtfully, it was all because of a strange feeling. He wasn't drawn to her blood as much as he might have been. Rather, he was simply curious about what it might taste like, although he was quick to clarify that he shouldn't take that literally. To this, Preya answered easily, without a trace of fear, that if he was so interested he could try her blood next time. The boy froze, looking at her with horror, as if he could not believe that he had heard such a thing. Million was sure that his sister was just playing. She could say whatever she wanted, but in the end she would get scared and run away, so there was no point in taking her words seriously. It was too dangerous. Preya, on the other hand, saw it as something different. For her, drinking blood was like donating blood, a normal process, so she firmly stated that she was not afraid of it. Surprised by her confidence, Million decided to find out if she had any fears at all. She replied that she couldn't stand dark and quiet places. He noted that disgust and fear were not the same thing. This interested Preya, and she asked what Million himself was afraid of. He hesitated a little and then admitted that he really did have something he was afraid of. The girl was not going to leave this question unanswered. She persistently asked what exactly frightened him. Million reluctantly but honestly admitted that he disliked chatting the most. Preya frowned in surprise. She had just explained that hatred and fear were different things. She had jokingly threatened that she would now simply have to kill him for such stupidity. Hearing this, Million couldn't help but smile sheepishly. He knew it was just a joke. After all, fear was something he had never experienced. He suddenly said that he liked her outburst of anger. Preya was embarrassed. She did not expect this. It all happened so suddenly that she did not even have the words to respond. Million felt his irritation evaporate. Her behavior had previously infuriated him, but now he himself did not understand when exactly he had become so calm around her. So he confessed that he hoped she wouldn't change. Preya laughed, assuring him that he had nothing to worry about. She would always feel the same way about him because he was her only brother. He liked the way she said it. But he didn't say anything back. He just remembered the feeling of warmth that suddenly enveloped him. However, he noted to himself that he had never thought of her as a sister. The words came out unexpectedly, but it seemed he had been prepared for this admission. Preya was confused, not understanding what he meant. Weren't they family? Why was he talking as if there had never been any kinship between them? They hadn't yet had time to sort out their feelings when they suddenly heard someone scream. It was the maid who was looking for them. Their hide-and-seek was over. Million quickly stood up and said that it was time for them to go back, but Preya suddenly felt that she did not want this moment to end and tried to hold on to it. His words came back to her mind. If he didn't consider her a sister, then who was she to him? The thought made her heart clench with anxiety. She didn't want to believe that she was the only one who saw him as a family. What if it was different for him? The thought haunted her, making her feel lonely. Years passed. In her room, she sat by the window looking at the roses. One careless gesture, and a thin thorn pricked her finger, leaving a drop of blood. At that moment, a familiar voice rang out. Preya's heart jumped. She hadn't heard it for so long that now, hearing it, she felt real joy. Million suddenly looked at his sister and noticed that a drop of blood had appeared on her hand. His voice sounded calm, but his eyes showed a faint interest in what had happened. Preya stepped closer, raised her hand, and smiled slightly, asking if he wanted to try. Her tone was playful, as if this was some kind of fun, and she didn't see anything strange in it. The brother just chuckled, shaking his head, and said that she was still behaving like an unrestrained child. Her spontaneity amused him, but at the same time made him frown slightly. Preya thought he was just trying to make fun of her, but Million suddenly took her hand and, without looking away, leaned down to taste her blood. It caught her off guard, but she didn't pull her hand away. His tongue slid over her skin, and he looked at her carefully, as if waiting for some kind of reaction. She, in turn, asked why he was looking so intently, as if he was trying to understand something important. Million thoughtfully noted that, strange as the situation was, she seemed completely calm. Her composure surprised him, but perhaps that was what made the moment even more unusual. Preya shrugged and said she was just sharing something tasty with her brother, but he chuckled and admitted that he was a little disappointed to hear such a simple answer, as if he expected something different from her. She wondered if she had answered too sharply. Perhaps she should have chosen different words. There was something in his voice that made her feel momentarily uneasy. Million, however, did not pursue the topic further, and instead said that he had a gift for her. There was something warm in his voice, as if he had been thinking about this surprise for a long time. Today was her day to go to the river and receive gifts. It was a kind of custom that made this day special, and she was already looking forward to it. Million added that he had already received his gift, to which Preya replied that it didn't count. If he wanted to keep things fair, then she should give him something special too. He just grinned and said that there was only one thing that was valuable to him. There was something deeper than simple expectation in his gaze that made her freeze for a second. He suddenly pulled her into a hug and quietly asked if she could give him this. His voice was soft, but there was an urgency in it, as if he was talking about something really important. Million said he wanted her to give him all of herself. His words sounded serious, almost mesmerizing, and Preya suddenly felt a strange heaviness in her chest. She wondered what it would be like when the flowers she had brought to the river withered. Everything passes, even the most beautiful moments, and the thought filled her with a momentary sadness. Million looked at her carefully and asked if she wanted to say something, or just stand there silently looking at him. There was impatience in his voice, and she knew he was waiting for an answer. Preya looked at her brother with admiration and said that he looked incredibly cool. She really liked his new look, so she congratulated him with a smile on his knighthood. Million replied that it was just a formality, but Preya disagreed. After all, he was now the crown prince's trusted man, which meant he would be close to the one who would one day become the ruler. The girl was happy for her brother, but his reaction surprised her. He frowned and suddenly asked if she had any interest in the crown prince himself. It sounded unexpected. Million added that she shouldn't even think about it. He turned away sharply, as if his words were unpleasant to him, and muttered that he was ready to give up his position right then and there. Preya frowned, not understanding what was happening. After all, today was an important day. Million was officially becoming a knight. She confidently stated that she had to attend the ceremony, but her brother suddenly said that if she came, she should close her eyes. This seemed strange to her. Maybe he was embarrassed by her. Even if he didn't consider her a sister, forbidding her to go was too much. Seeing her indignation, Million suddenly grinned and admitted that he was just joking. After all, a gift loses its meaning if the person for whom it was prepared cannot see it. Preya frowned, trying to understand what he was talking about. What other gift? But her brother only smiled mysteriously and, shrugging his shoulders, said that he himself did not know what he meant. She said that it was time for him to go, now, reminding her not to be late. Then she said goodbye to him, feeling that this moment had become important, and a little sad for her. He couldn't get rid of the disturbing thoughts, as if something had been wrong from the very beginning. In his head, it all seemed strange, and now it had become completely unbearable for him. Toto, who had turned into a wolf during these days, was still wary. He was loyal to his mistress and believed that she should stay away from people like her brother. The wolf, watching the girl closely, noticed that she shouldn't accept gifts from strangers, especially from someone like him, but she, without thinking, said that it was her brother, and everything changed. The wolf advised her to say directly that she did not like it. The girl turned to the lady and noticed her reaction. She simply remained silent, not giving any obvious reaction to the wolf's words. She confessed that she had expected nothing from him except that he would always consider her a stranger. She knew that he had other goals, and there was no room in her heart for hopes for good intentions. The wolf added regretfully that it must have hurt her. He advised her to take off the pin, but the girl did not understand what it meant, and could not understand why it was so important to him. The lady, with a quiet sigh, said that it was the first gift from her brother and she did not want to lose it. She asked the maid to help her prepare for the ceremony where everything might change. The initiation ceremony is a significant moment when every young man who reaches the age of 18 officially becomes a knight. This event is celebrated with great fanfare and is eagerly awaited by everyone. On this day, members of noble families become knights. The emperor personally selects several young men with special abilities, appointing them commanders in the army. This is an important event. Noble knights form platoons. Milian became a knight not because of his family power but because of his outstanding abilities. This attracted attention and earned him respect. Preya had heard that the bloodline was checked very carefully. Her brother would definitely become a Phoenix Knight since he had such connections with his family. She thought that would explain a lot to her. Preya's parents arrived at the imperial palace where the ball was to take place. The anticipation of this event brought them great pleasure. Everyone was anticipating the incredible moments of the celebration. She ordered flowers and buttons for the cuff. Preya wondered who would attract attention at the ball, her or her brother. The girls discussed how they had traveled across the country for this event. Rumors were circulating that the chance to see the knights would not come again. Preya had already received an oath from one of the knights, and she was proud of that moment. But there was still something mysterious about that promise. A quarrel began in conversation with the other girls, but Preya decided to ignore their words. She thought about the tradition of the oath, but her brother never mentioned it, which aroused her curiosity. Preya wondered to whom her brother Milian would swear an oath. At that moment, she heard her maid, who was also wondering to whom her brother was going to offer his oath. The lady was surprised that the maid was familiar with this tradition. Then she began to tell that some noble knights offer their hand and heart to ladies during this ceremony. Other knights were also going to follow the tradition and make proposals. It was already known to everyone. It was like a symbol of honor and respect, which became obligatory for many. Recently, knights have started proposing to their relatives if they don't have lovers. Perhaps Milian will decide to propose to his mistress if that happens. The girl thought that she was unsure of her feelings, and her thoughts about romance were slowly coming into order. Perhaps her brother had not even heard of such a tradition, and this confused her. She noticed that even if Milian knew about this tradition, he didn't have a girlfriend and his family didn't seem to even accept it. This added uncertainty to his intentions. To be honest, Preya can't remember her brother ever dating anyone. His work took up all his time, and sometimes he would see friends, but these meetings were short-lived. The maid said that everything was about to begin. There was a strong energy in the Edmore and Rachel household, but there was no need to mix it with anything else at the moment. Everything had to be in its own time. Preya attended home economics classes, but her brother didn't seem to be interested in them. He didn't care what she was learning or how she was doing it. When Preya heard the trumpets, she saw her brother in the crowd. As expected, he was in front of everyone. He noticed her gaze and smiled happily in response. It was so nice. Preya was simply delighted by his reaction, but she was a little embarrassed because all the knights around began to make their proposals to the ladies, and the atmosphere became even more solemn. As Preya thought her brother did not know about the existence of this tradition, but suddenly she noticed that he began to quickly dismount from his horse, and there was some determination in his eyes. He stood aside as if nothing was happening, but soon he took a step forward, and this attracted attention. Preya was surprised because his steps became more and more confident. He seemed to keep moving towards her, and the ladies around him started to panic. They didn't know what he was going to do, and he was getting closer and closer, and all eyes were on him. Many thought that he was going to make his vows to one of the ladies, but to their surprise he approached not one of them, but directly to his sister, which was a real surprise for everyone. Milian was so happy that Preya wore his gift. He couldn't even hide his joy as he watched her try on his surprise. It seemed like a real miracle. When Preya noticed that Milian had dropped to one knee, her surprise knew no bounds. She froze, not believing her eyes, and instantly lost the power of speech. Milian, with a smile on his face, asked her to give him her hand. She thought for a moment, but quickly realized that she could not refuse. Her heart beat faster. Everything that was happening seemed a little magical to her when Milian, bending down, kissed her hand. This gesture was so unexpected that she almost couldn't believe it. At that moment, Preya felt like her heart was about to jump out of her chest. Her emotions were so overwhelming that she didn't even know what to say. It was a moment she couldn't have dreamed of. Preya looked at her brother and could not understand why he was suddenly making an oath to her. It seemed strange, illogical, because she had not asked for anything like that. What kind of oath? Why? Where did such seriousness in his eyes come from? What was especially disconcerting was how long he held her hand, pressing it to his lips. Was he supposed to do that? Was it part of some ritual? Or was he just trying to emphasize the importance of the moment? She didn't know, but she felt a sense of confusion creeping up on her. Unable to bear it any longer, she turned to her brother and asked him directly, "Is he sure that he is doing the right thing? After all, if he makes a mistake, the consequences can be irreversible." Preya waited for him to say something encouraging, but Milian only looked at her thoughtfully. After a moment, he stood up as if making some final decision and said calmly that all this was tradition. It had to be that way. That was the way it was, and he could not do otherwise. His voice was firm, but there was something in his eyes that Preya had not managed to catch. The girl did not know whether to believe these words. She looked at the man standing next to her, and overcoming the internal tension, asked her brother to stop. All this seemed superfluous, unnecessary, some kind of theater the meaning of which was elusive. Milian didn't argue. He nodded, but before he fell silent, he looked at her intently, as if he was trying to say something else. Preya realized that thoughts were swarming in his head, that he hadn't finished speaking, and asked what else he wanted to tell her. Instead of answering, the brother slowly touched his shoulder, took off his cloak, and without saying a word, threw it over Preya. His movements were careful, almost solemn, as if he were handing her not just a piece of cloth, but something more. Preya didn't understand what it all meant, but she felt that something important was happening. Perhaps this was also part of the tradition. Everything that was happening around her seemed mysterious, but she didn't have the strength to figure it out right now. She looked at her brother, hoping to find some hint of an explanation in his face, but he was silent. People were standing around and everyone was looking at them with the same amazement as if they had witnessed something incredible. No one could believe what was happening. No one had ever seen anything like this before. There was tension in the air, as if something else was about to happen, something no one expected. Preya tried to understand what all this talk was about, but the words sounded fragmentary, meaningless. They seemed to form a pattern, the meaning of which eluded her, and any attempt to understand it only made it more confusing. Suddenly, Milian put his hand on her shoulder. He spoke quietly, but there was determination in his voice. There was no need to worry, this was just a tension that was coming her way. But this explanation did not reassure her, it only gave rise to more questions. Her brother leaned toward her and kissed her forehead before stepping back. Preya felt embarrassment creeping up on her. The gesture was unexpected, unfamiliar. She looked up at him confused, and Milian just smiled as if everything was normal. The people around them simply froze in amazement, their faces expressing pure shock. None of them had ever seen anything like this, and now they could not take their eyes off what was happening. Whispers ran through the crowd. Some looked at each other, not believing their eyes. But Preya herself was the most shocked. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. It all seemed like a dream or a ridiculous joke. She tried to understand what exactly caused such a reaction from those around her, but she couldn't find an answer yet. And suddenly, she heard voices, people whispering about how they envied her. Someone even said it out loud, which completely confused Preya. Envy. But of what? Why? She couldn't understand what in this situation could cause such a reaction. Unable to restrain herself, she turned to the speakers and asked them directly what they meant. She needed to hear an explanation, because she herself would hardly have been able to figure it out. The question sounded clear, and the girls exchanging glances decided to answer her. It turned out that the knight's cape was given out by the emperor himself, and only just before the appointment. It was a special sign that meant a lot. Hearing this, Preya frowned slightly. She knew this part, but something else clearly eluded her understanding. But the women continued explaining further. They said that now she would not be able to receive oaths of fealty from other knights. Unless that knight was stronger than the one who had already sworn an oath to her. Preya tensed up. This already sounded rather strange. Another lady added that such a rule was connected with the duel. If someone wanted to swear an oath to her, he would have to fight her current knight. After all, the cloak symbolized that this lady now belonged to him. Preya could not believe her ears. It shook her to the core, but she didn't want to show her confusion. Pretending to take the information calmly, she simply decided to continue. She had too many questions right now, but it wasn't time to sort them out yet. Preya couldn't understand what was going on in her brother's head when he decided to do something like that. How could he do that? What was he thinking? Confusion flashed in his eyes. Irritation rose in his chest. It seemed impossible. She had already drained her 5th glass of ice water, but she still couldn't come to her senses. Her thoughts were confused. Her heart was beating faster than usual. Was Million really going to ruin her wedding? How could he do such a thing without telling her? And her maid is no better. She knows all the traditions, knows what should be done and how, but she never bothered to explain to Preya about the cloak and other details. Is that normal? Why did she keep silent when she should have warned? People around her were saying strange things. She caught fragments of phrases but could not connect them into a whole. Confusion rolled over her, not allowing her to think clearly. The maid noticed this and tried to hold her back, but Preya only frowned more. She turned her gaze to the lady and, lowering her voice a little, asked what she was going to do if Million really dared to make such a proposal. She wanted to hear at least some explanation of what was happening. The lady looked puzzled. It seemed she did not quite understand what Preya was getting at. Her face showed excitement, and she asked again. Then the maid, shaking her head, replied that it was completely incredible and even hard to believe. Yes, they were not blood relatives, but they had spent the last 8 years together as brother and sister, and the same life awaited them. It was an undeniable fact. How could anyone imagine anything else? The maid, as if reading her thoughts, calmly remarked, even if that was the case, Million and Preya were not related by blood. However, her brothers certainly did not have such feelings for her, she was sure of it. It all seemed ridiculous. He decided not to bother with it. It was all too pointless, and he was just her little brother. His head was starting to split, and the only thing that seemed sensible was to drink more water to clear his head. Looking around, Preya suddenly heard someone calling. The voice was familiar, but in the noise around her, it was difficult to make out where it was coming from. Her heart sank with anticipation, and she turned around abruptly, and then she saw them. Her parents were standing nearby. Their faces were shining with joy, and noticing her gaze, they immediately headed towards her, looking incredibly happy. Her father casually asked her what news she had. He looked at her attentively, waiting for an answer, but not showing any particular impatience. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of curiosity in it, as if he already knew something. Preya didn't immediately understand what he was talking about, but then her mother intervened. She said that she had heard rumors, that her brother had confessed his feelings to some girl. Mother suggested that Preya could have seen her and perhaps knew the details. There were rumors circulating in the house, and it was unclear what to believe. It was hard to even imagine that Million was such a romantic mother wanted to hear the whole truth, so she looked at Preya with anticipation, hoping that she would tell what she knew. Preya was surprised and slightly confused. She could not even imagine that her brother was capable of something like this. It seemed that he even surpassed in this regard the son of his father's old friend, who had always been considered an exemplary young man. She didn't know what to say, and after thinking for a moment, she said that she had actually received the cloak from her brother. These words sounded unexpected, but they were true, and she had no choice but to say it out loud. The parents were stunned. They looked at each other and asked if they had heard correctly. Preya noted that she herself did not fully understand why Million had done this, but the fact remained a fact. He had given this thing to her. The father could not comprehend his son's actions. He tried to understand what had made Million make such an unexpected gesture towards his sister. His face expressed complete incomprehension, as if he was looking for an answer he did not like. After a pause, he turned to his daughter again. His voice was more serious than before. He asked where she got the brooch pin that was currently adorning her head. Preya blushed and, looking down in embarrassment, replied that her brother had given her this hairpin as well. It seemed simply magical to her, and she did not understand why her parents were so worried. The father was absolutely horrified, his face contorted with worry. He had not expected such a turn of events. His wife also looked confused, her eyes darting between her husband and children as if she was trying to find an explanation for what was happening. The father, frowning, leaned toward his wife and, lowering his voice, whispered something in her ear. He clearly did not want the children to hear what was being said. The woman looked at him incredulously at first, but soon her eyes widened in surprise. She was so shocked that she couldn't help but ask him if he had really said that. Her voice trembled with surprise. Her husband sighed guiltily and, avoiding her gaze, quietly apologized. He admitted that he should have noticed it sooner. Preya felt completely lost. What was going on? Why were her parents acting so strange? She couldn't stand the uncertainty and demanded that everything be explained to her right now. However, her parents quickly pulled themselves together. They assured her that everything was fine and that she had nothing to worry about. After all, Million was just joking, and there was no deeper meaning to it. But Preya couldn't just let it go. She didn't believe that her brother was capable of joking with such a serious expression on his face. He was too serious when he said it. Father smiled faintly and said that it was generally true. Sometimes Million did give his cloak to his sister, accompanying it with the words that no one should approach it. It was a family trait. And then it dawned on Preya. Her parents clearly knew more than they were saying. If this was just familial love, then Million had truly accepted her as his sister. She was delighted by this revelation. Her heart was filled with warmth. So he did it especially for her? When Preya asked this question, her father did not deny it. He nodded and said that it could be considered that way. At that moment, Million appeared among the crowd. He walked confidently towards them, but before he could say hello, his father suddenly grabbed his hand and, without saying a word, pulled him away, dragging his son along with him. Preya and her mother left the house in complete confusion, not understanding what was happening. Why were they forced to leave so suddenly? What had happened? Everything was happening too fast, leaving them without answers. The wife noticed that she and her husband had something to talk about, but she tried not to escalate the situation. She asked her daughter not to worry and to take her mind off things by trying the cake. There was a softness in her voice, but also some anxiety. Preya, hearing this, remembered that she once adored cherries, but now she was no longer that little girl. However, her mother insisted. Even if the taste had changed, she still liked cherries because they were something familiar. The father turned sharply to Million and asked point-blank what he had done, but the boy only smirked and pretended not to understand what was being said. His smug expression only made the father angrier. Father couldn't stand it any longer and raised his voice, demanding that he stop pretending to be innocent. He was talking about the cape, and Million knew exactly what he was talking about. There was no point in pretending not to understand. Father wasn't going to tolerate it. Million shrugged and noted with a slight grin that it seemed like everyone already knew, but his father wasn't going to believe the rumors and wanted to hear it all from him personally right now. He looked his son in the eyes and asked him a direct question. "Is this true?" Million nodded, confirming that everything was as his father thought. His voice did not tremble. He was absolutely calm. The father tried to get through to his son to understand whether he even realized what he had done, but in response he saw only stubbornness and cold indifference. Million really didn't understand what the problem was. He and Preya weren't even blood relatives, so why did it matter? But his father was adamant. It didn't matter. To him, Preya was still his sister, so there could be no wedding. Million thought for a moment, then quietly apologized and said he understood. But he immediately added that he was going to marry Preya anyway. The father even sighed with relief at first, thinking that his son had realized his mistake. But then he froze, thinking about what he had heard. He thought he had misheard. Horrified, he asked again if he had understood his son's words correctly, but Million only confidently repeated his decision without looking away. He had to make it as clear as possible. His marriage to Rachel's family was not for love, but for an arranged marriage. He hadn't argued with that, but now he was going to do what his heart told him to do. His father had immediately declared that it wouldn't happen, and he knew it was because of their background. The father confirmed, yes, they were Edmores, which meant they couldn't be together, but the boy wasn't going to give up that easily. He said he would renounce his name. If he passed the knight's test and received the title, he could marry his sister no matter what. The father just chuckled. He said that if his son wanted freedom so much, he should cut off the head of the enemy army's commander. Then perhaps he would have a chance for something more, the head of the king himself. But that was not what mattered to him. He saw the Edmure blood boiling in his son, and he knew he was only 18. He was not ready for real slaughter. How could he stand on a battlefield soaked in blood? But his son challenged him. Didn't his father think it would be better if he simply ran away, unable to control himself? Or did he seriously think he couldn't withstand the blood test? The father shook his head. No, he was sure of something else. He knew his son would not run away, but he also knew that he would not be able to resist the call of his nature. When the battle began, he would no longer distinguish between enemy and allies, and then it would all be over. The boy stepped forward and confidently said that his ability to distinguish enemies from friends had never failed him. He knew that from the moment he tasted Preya's blood, ordinary blood no longer caused any reaction in him. The father shook his head skeptically, thinking that his son was mistaken, but the boy irritably objected that he was not as stupid as he seemed to think. He was perfectly aware of what he was saying, and he did not intend to change his mind. The father sighed and waved his hand, allowing him to do whatever he wanted. He saw no point in arguing, since he couldn't even say for sure why their family was so small. He was sure that his son's stubbornness would not last long, and he would return before a month had passed. The boy only smiled wryly. He had expected exactly this reaction, and was not at all surprised by it. Although the father tried to soften the conversation by adding that he hadn't quite meant it that way, the son was no longer listening. He turned and walked away, only throwing a word over his shoulder so that his father wouldn't forget about this conversation. The man watched him go, not believing that he was really leaving. He even took a step forward, intending to stop him, but the son did not look back. He simply continued walking, leaving behind his father, who was in shock at what was happening. Meanwhile, Preya noticed her father returning, but her brother was not with him. Her heart sank in anxiety. She clutched the small bundle to her chest, the gift she had so wanted to give to Million, and realized that she had to hurry now. But suddenly she heard someone calling her. The voice was unfamiliar, and Preya froze, trying to see who was speaking. She did not understand who it was, and looked in his direction warily. A knight stood before her. He said in a calm voice that the commander was waiting for her. There was no haste or threat in his tone, just a dry statement of fact. Preya perked up. Perhaps Million was waiting for her. She was delighted, deciding that her brother wanted to meet her in person. Maybe he had some important news for her. Most likely he couldn't come earlier because of the crowd. She assumed that this guy had also just joined the Knights today and wasn't used to the rules yet. Her suspicions were confirmed, but suddenly she realized that darkness was already gathering around them. The day had passed too quickly, and now the night was softly enveloping them in its shadows. Preya asked warily where they were going. It was dark and a little creepy around, but the guy calmly answered that they were already there. Preya was taken aback by what was happening around her. She immediately felt that something was wrong. Her thoughts began to get confused, and she decided that she needed to figure out what was behind this strange happening. Preya decided to use her power at least a little to understand what was going on, but as soon as she concentrated, her gaze was drawn to a boy standing nearby. His appearance confused her, but she continued to watch. The guy was very nice, and he was happy to meet Angelica. She was like a bride to him, and he was genuinely happy to see them. His happy behavior confused Preya a little. She couldn't understand the whole situation. He began asking her for urki, which turned out to be pieces of his heart. Preya, surprised by his request, could not quite understand what he meant. Everything that was happening seemed strange and even a little absurd. This guy suddenly knelt down right in front of her. There were musicians around, and the girl herself could not comprehend what was happening. The whole scene was so unusual and unclear that Preya did not know how to react to it. Confused, Preya turned to the knight and asked him directly if he had really said that Million wanted to see her. Her words sounded distrustful because everything that was happening seemed too strange and unusual. The knight asked again if he really said that it was not Billion who was waiting for her. The guy who proposed to her looked puzzled and did not recognize his bride. He was clearly confused. The girl, noticing his confusion, explained with slight regret that apparently there had been a small mistake, and she had been called here by accident. She felt how awkward it all had become. It seemed like the proposal he was about to make was ruined because suddenly a girl appeared calling out to Billion. Joy flashed in the boy's eyes as he saw her approaching. She looked incredibly happy, and the moment they met was full of emotions. The knight was also happy, not hiding his joy when he saw how Billion eagerly greeted Angelica. After they met, everything started to look like in the movie. They started kissing. The knight, feeling awkward, asked Preya for forgiveness, as if it was his fault that everything went wrong. Preya, smiling a little sheepishly, said that nothing terrible had happened. She even wished them a good time, but her words sounded a little stupid since she did not quite understand what was happening. But since the place was really beautiful, she decided that she could just take a walk. It was not just a walk, but a chance to enjoy nature and the forgotten silence that reigned around. On days like these, it was rare to have a chance to see the palace and its surroundings, so Preya decided to take a leisurely stroll. The wind gently swayed the leaves, and her footsteps sounded soft against the calm atmosphere. During her walk, she noticed many fireflies dancing in the air, and her heart filled with joy. These little lights seemed almost magical, and she couldn't help but smile. Preya heard a sound behind her, and at that moment she decided to turn around to find out who was there. She felt that someone was watching her, and it became curious for her. When she turned around, there was a guy in front of her with black hair that shone slightly against the light, and eyes with a golden tint which gave him a mysterious and slightly mystical look. The girl thought he might be royalty and quickly introduced herself. She apologized for her curiosity, explaining that she just wanted to enjoy the view. He said he didn't mind and invited her to stay. Preya thanked him, but she was tormented inside. On the one hand, she was grateful for the permission to stay, but on the other, she was tormented by the thought that she could not leave because he was a member of the royal family. The fireflies around her were twinkling with such beautiful lights that she couldn't take her eyes off them. It was a sight that caught her attention, and she happily continued to enjoy the moment. Then the guy, not wanting to remain in the shadows, turned to her with a question whether the ball was really fun and exciting, asking her impressions of how the evening went for her. Preya replied that the ball had been very fun and eventful and that she had enjoyed herself immensely. He seemed to understand her feelings, telling her that he had sat surrounded by flowers, and that had seemed a little strange too. Preya felt that the situation was becoming more and more awkward and was impatient for it to be over. She tried to hide this feeling by pretending that she had to leave, but then the guy spoke again. He said he wanted to walk with her a little longer, and then he would leave too. Preya was a little surprised, but decided not to object, hoping that it would not last too long. The girl tried to calm him down, telling him that he shouldn't worry, but the boy didn't agree. He held out his hand, inviting her to follow him, and there was something soft and confident in his eyes. He added that they would see each other again and smiled as if this thought reassured him. Preya did not know what to answer, but she felt a little embarrassed by this moment. He repeated again that they would definitely meet again. Preya was taken aback by his confidence and felt her cheeks flush slightly with embarrassment. She suddenly extended her hand in response, and their palms met in a strange but warm gesture. It was unexpected, and they both felt a little nervous. A month later at lunch, Preya was very pleased with herself. She felt that a lot had changed in that time, and she was proud of herself for how she had handled the situation. Million noticed that Preya was in a good mood and thought that she probably remembered something funny, but the girl said with a smile that Erica was returning today and this made her happy. Preya was not quite sure who this man was, although she thought he might be the traveler. She thought for a long time and then confirmed that yes, it was indeed her father. Preya couldn't wait to tell all the details of her trip. She didn't hide how much she envied those who could travel with their parents. Million was delighted by her stories. Preya was always happy to share her impressions, but suddenly she fell silent, as if something had distracted her, and her gaze became thoughtful. Her brother noticed this, but did not immediately ask what had happened. Million was incredibly caring. He considered her a real part of his family. At one point, he offered to go to the theater with her on the weekend, hoping that she would agree. Preya happily accepted the offer, immediately saying that she really wanted to go. She thought that perhaps her parents would join too, but Million said that they would be busy. Preya was a little surprised. It was hard to imagine what her parents might do on the weekend, but what was even more surprising was that Million was so shocked by her doubts about going alone. After a short pause, Preya, laughing a little, said that of course she agreed to go with him alone. The brothers said that Preya should not plan her weekend in advance because it could be changed. At that moment, a maid came up to them who said with an important look that she wanted to tell them something. The lady, hearing her, nodded, indicating that she needed to go meet Erica, which meant it was time to leave this place. She turned around and walked towards the exit with restraint, leaving her companions behind. Erica finally got off the ship. Preya happily noticed her friend among the many people standing on the pier, and her heart filled with warmth from the long-awaited meeting. Preya approached Erica with a smile, welcoming her back. She looked at her face with genuine interest, which looked a little tired, but still exuded the same confidence. They started talking, and Preya couldn't help but notice how tanned Erica was. Preya joked that perhaps her friend had used the cream she had given her before leaving. Erica chuckled and confirmed that the sun was indeed merciless. However, she had one more surprise for Preya, a gift she had brought back from her journey. When they were finally inside, Erica handed Preya a gift. She said it was for her friend without giving any further details. Preya looked at the box with interest and accepted it. Preya asked again what the gift was, but Erica only smiled mysteriously and told her to open it without thinking. It was her way, not to explain too much, but just to trust. When Preya opened the package, she first thought it was just a regular mineral, but Erica explained that her father said there was a spirit in the stone which added to the mystery of the gift. Preya felt something subtle that made her think of an ancient tribe that once lived in the jungle. She believed that a god could actually live in the stone, as many in the past believed. In ancient times, the tribe believed that spirits could be born from various objects, and those who worshipped them perceived them as gods. This mineral was one of such symbols. Erica smiled and added that it was indeed possible. However, she had found the mineral by accident and did not know what to do with it. Knowing that Preya could communicate with spirits, she decided to give it to her. Preya thought about it and suggested that the spirit the ancients worshipped might be the same age as her own spirit, Toto. It was odd, but the more she thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Erica became interested and asked how her Toto lived. Preya answered that it was better not to show him Toto was a plush toy, but for her, it was much more. Now he was a huge wolf, and Preya got used to his form. Preya said she would take the mineral for herself, but she couldn't say for sure when the spirit would awaken. She was happy that it had managed to get to her and not fall into the hands of the Spirit Association, as it might have happened. Erica wasn't quite sure what was going on and was grateful that Preya had agreed to take care of the mineral. Preya suggested they discuss something more important, how Erica's journey had gone and what she had brought back with her. Erica excitedly shared her impressions, telling how wonderful everything was. After Erica left Toto, the stuffed rabbit noticed the mineral and immediately became interested in it, his attention drawn to the unusualness of the object. Toto carefully asked Preya what kind of mineral it was. Preya replied that it was a rare object that had been given to her. She invited Toto to look at it carefully, explaining that the mineral came from the jungle where it was found. Preya confirmed that the mineral was indeed found in the distant jungles of Koho, which were far from the empire of Eros. This place was known for its unusual nature and various spiritual entities that lived there. She asked if Toto knew the spirit that was connected to this mineral. Toto thought about it and said that he couldn't say for sure because the energy from the mineral was too weak to clearly determine the connection with the spirit. Preya thought about it, wondering if perhaps there really was a spirit in this place. She could feel it responding to her touch. It was strange but exciting. It seemed to be in a deep sleep, as if it was very tired and could not wake up. The wolf, listening carefully, said that judging by the energy, this spirit would not live long. Once it awakened, its strength was exhausted, and it would probably be a quick and painful awakening. It was difficult to say what exactly was happening to it. Preya, worried, expressed her desire to protect him to prevent something worse from happening. The wolf became curious, asking what had attacked her. She was unsure but knew she had to do something to help this spirit. The girl said she had never seen a spirit sleeping in a stone before. It was amazing, and she had heard that it was worshipped as a god who brought fire. It gave a sense of antiquity and power that was hard to understand. The wolf thought about it and suggested that perhaps due to the two fire elements in the spirit, it had made some sort of contract. This could explain its existence and power, although Preya was not sure how exactly it could be related to this spirit. After that, Preya said she had had enough. The wolf remarked that the fire spirit was not really that bad. He even liked the smell of burnt fire, not rotten water. Then Preya reminded him that Marina might be offended if she heard something like that, so she should think before saying such things out loud. Wolf agreed that it wasn't a good idea. The wolf said that he shouldn't worry about the newborn frog who was just beginning to appear in their world. It wasn't such a strong threat to be too afraid of. Preya said that the wolf was acting strangely. She thought that he shouldn't do that because the spirit of water had always been very attentive to him, especially lately. She noticed that Marina was now smaller in size, barely the size of a palm. The wolf replied that it didn't matter to him. He believed that it wasn't a matter of size but of strength of spirit. The important thing was that he remained strong despite everything else. Preya noticed that the wolf was always trying to prove his strength and love for himself, just like her brother. The wolf responded by saying that he shouldn't be compared to this boy. Preya often noticed how her brother Milian was drowning in his ambitions and pride, as if he lived only for himself. One day, Brake looked at him and said that maybe it wasn't so bad because everyone needs to be proud of something. When Milian began to complain that he could no longer listen to this topic, the wolf standing next to him in turn said that in fact all this was annoying. He was tired of these endless conversations and only wanted peace. Milian suddenly noticed that Preya was in a good mood. He noted this, and the girl, smiling, replied that it was because of the upcoming trip to the theater. All this anticipatory joy created an atmosphere of lightness and happiness. Brake smiled and remarked that it had been a while since she had seen her like this, which was nice. Preya winked and said that she should go out more often to stay in that mood. It was truly refreshing. As soon as they stepped outside, Preya thought that her brother had probably already booked seats at the theater. Her expectations were realistic because she was sure that Milian would not forget about such important things. Milian noted with a grin that Preya was as lazy as many others, hinting at her past habits. He was always ready to make fun of her, but it was not always pleasant, especially when it came to something important. Preya immediately realized that he was hinting at how she had once forgotten to book tickets. Her eyes dimmed for a moment, but she quickly pulled herself together, deciding that she would not give in to his provocations. She frowned and said she didn't want him to say that Preya asked directly, "When was that?" with a challenge in her voice, trying to assert her rightness and put an end to this discussion once and for all. He decided not to talk about it, and she, noticing his silence, asked how things were going with the Knights. He thought for a moment, but answered that everything was fine. The girl continued her question, asking him if he thought Milian had accepted his proposal. Their relationship was unconventional, and she was sure that everything would end well. Milian, slightly embarrassed, did not quite understand what she was talking about. He asked who she was addressing such questions to, since he had difficulty grasping the meaning of her words. The girl smiled and explained that she had been invited to this by chance, but she had told him everything she knew anyway. It had not been planned, but she felt that she needed to share the information. Milian was really surprised and chuckled, noting that something was always happening to her. He didn't know what to expect from her next actions, since she was always the center of attention. She in turn admitted that she almost ruined the relationship and said that it was extremely unfortunate. It was a lesson for her, but such situations could not leave her indifferent. Her brother looked at her seriously and advised her not to follow just anyone next time. She, without losing her composure, replied that there was no need to say that because she was strong enough to handle it. The guy said that he had already warned her. She should follow someone because she was weak, but in fact he did not say that. He was just trying to explain that she should be careful and not be alone. The girl couldn't understand what he was talking about, and he continued that it was because there were those who would want to fight her. She thought that the correct answer would be one where he would no longer leave her alone. He calmed her down and told her not to worry, because if she got into trouble, he would come to her aid immediately. He promised to be there no matter what. She, a little surprised, asked how he was going to do it, and the guy answered that he would always know if she was injured. After all, her brother, like a real dog, could smell blood from a great distance, and she herself often compared him to this. The guy asked her with a smile if she would call him her puppy, because at that moment he really looked so cute. She couldn't help but notice how funny he said it. Preya stubbornly refused, deciding that the huge puppies were just a fantasy. However, the guy did not lose his head, and smiling said that if that was the case, he would bite for real. This only provoked her. She told him that if he decided to bite her, she would bite him back. There was a confidence in her words, as if she really could do it. The guy smiled and noted that he was now scared, but he continued to joke. He added that if he suddenly found himself in danger, he just needed to remember that a drop of blood was enough to save him. The girl asked him again if he meant that she should take hits in a fight to win. He in turn asked again if she really grabbed the hair of the Marquise Leslie's daughter because of that. Preya felt uneasy, not quite understanding how he could have known about this. He easily noted that this story was no secret, and now that she heard it, she felt ashamed of her actions. It was an old story that she thought no one remembered anymore, but when she heard his words, she wondered if her parents knew about this incident. The brother answered confidently that she shouldn't worry. He had already made sure that their parents didn't find out. Preya could rest easy. Everything was under control and he would sort it out. He added that if she wanted to do something, she should just do it the way she felt right. He would take care of the rest, let her do it on her own. He would be there to support her. Preya was delighted by these words, and her brother confidently said that if something went wrong, he was always ready to intervene. He would take revenge if anything, and she should not worry. Everything would be fine no matter what. Her brother confirmed again that this was true. Preya felt that he really cared about her protection because she was his older sister. It was strange to hear these words, but deep down she felt support. Preya said doubtfully that nothing should be broken, that they should not be forced to do anything. But her brother agreed, said that everything was right, and they would move on without interfering in other people's affairs. She responded by saying that the show would start soon, so it would be better to shut up and not discuss it anymore. Time was running out, and this was the last thing they could do. However, it was strange to her that there was still no one there. All the seats remained empty, and time dragged on as if something was wrong. Why everyone was late, she could not understand. Preya began to think that this was not just a coincidence, but some kind of strange magic, because the theater they were in was too famous to be a random choice. Million, her brother, told her that the entire theater had been booked on his initiative, which surprised Preya a little. She couldn't understand why he needed to do this, and her mind was filled with questions. Preya couldn't believe her ears when she asked him again. Her brother said that everything was arranged so that they could be there together. She was completely confused and couldn't understand what he was talking about. At that moment, Preya felt strangely embarrassed. Her brother was standing so close that it made her a little embarrassed. She quickly turned away, trying to hide her confusion, not knowing how to act. She immediately apologized to her brother, but he seemed to have caught her off guard, which made her even more embarrassed. She could not hide her feeling of awkwardness as the situation was indeed difficult. Million apologized too, but his apology was sincere. Preya turned to him and immediately asked her main question, why he decided to do such a thing and what will it give them. The brother smiled and replied that all this was being done so that she could enjoy everything that was happening. Preya thought about it, and then finding herself in bed, she was in complete shock from everything that had happened. The performance her brother took her to was truly exciting. Perhaps it was so unusual because she had not spent time with Million for a long time and her emotions were overwhelmed. Preya hopes that she will be able to see him more often in the future. She dreams that the relationship between them will become closer and they will be able to be a real family, as she always wanted. This gave her hope. At night, Million came to his sister, but did it quietly so as not to wake her. It was a secret he kept. He felt guilty and whispered an apology, although she was still asleep. But Million had an important conversation with his sister. He wanted to tell her that he would be back soon to reassure her. He left a note for her, hoping that she would read it when she woke up. The wolf asked the boys if he was really acting like a war. He was slightly annoyed and clearly didn't know what to expect from what was happening. His words sounded slightly sarcastic, emphasizing his displeasure. The wolf was a little angry, but the brother, without wasting time, replied that he had now become something of a guard, like a dog that guards the house. There was confidence in his voice that this would not raise questions. He added that he should not be interested in what the wolf was doing and that it did not concern him in any way. He was determined to do his own thing without being distracted by other people's problems. Preya noticed that the wolf was already openly flirting with her, and it looked like he was going to continue his actions by trying on some objects like batteries or a hairpin. This caused her mixed feelings. Million, seemingly oblivious to the tense situation, said that he had always strived to attract his sister's attention. For him, it was like a kind of game, and he never hid this desire. He added that it would be much easier for him without her spirit, but the wolf noted with a smile that for Preya he would still remain only a brother, so perhaps Million should not even try. Million replied that he would wait and see everything for himself. In response, the wolf asked if he was really going to war without fear of losing everything, thereby hinting at the inevitability of events. Million didn't immediately understand how he could have heard about this, but the wolf with a slight grin said that the wind was everywhere, and its ability to sense what was happening was not limited to visible things. The guy said he understood what was going on, but he never told his sister about it. It was a secret from her, and he didn't want to worry her with unnecessary worries. Wolf, sensing the tension, said that Pre would be better off without him. He spoke with confidence as if he knew she could handle it on her own, and that his presence was not necessary for her well-being. The guy got a little angry at his words, but the wolf continued that not only she, but he himself would be better off in this situation. It was as if he was trying to calm himself and Million down, saying that it was inevitable. The guy said that the wolf is a very vindictive creature despite the fact that he grabbed the stone. He did not try to throw it at the spirit. This act was not only a challenge, but also a warning. He knew that the wolf does not forgive. Then the wolf, frowning, replied that Preya would miss her brother. She would always miss him, and that was why she had to make sure he didn't die. The wolf's words sounded like a warning. He took out the man stone, which contained the energy of Preya, and the spirits. He believed that this would be the best way for both of them. The stone would provide connection and protection. Although it was dangerous, it was necessary for their survival. He told him more than once that he had to fight evil when blood appeared before him. However, the boy did not listen to this advice, ignoring the dangers and not thinking about the consequences. This led them to new and more difficult trials, and the boy, despite all the warnings, didn't think there was anything good in it. He said that if he had to fight, he saw no reason to give up his destiny. He was ready for what lay ahead. After that, he quietly left the room, feeling how the wolf, always near, seemed almost useless to him. He could no longer stay in this place where everything seemed too complicated and hopeless. The boy was shocked to see that Million had finally arrived. He hadn't expected him to show up. His reaction was one of bewilderment, since so much time had passed since they had last seen each other. He asked again if they were sure that nothing would change. Was Million really leaving since he wouldn't be able to return to the capital anytime soon? It all seemed so unexpected and absurd. Million calmly replied that he had already decided everything. It didn't matter much to him, he was determined, but he still understood that time was running out and they had to move forward no matter what. The boy sighed, feeling how hard it was. He told Million to introduce his little sister because if he didn't come back, she would still be waiting for him. That moment was coming too fast. He noticed her on the floor, lost in her thoughts. The guy thought about how to arrange a meeting if she was alone. He knew that without him everything would be different, but he was ready to do something for her. Million replied that if he had to sacrifice something, he would do it. He was determined and did not intend to regret anything. He even joked, promising that he would not leave her alone. In the morning, the girl was in shock, not understanding what was happening. Everything was mixed up in her head. She could not understand why everything had changed so abruptly. She felt that this was not just an accident, but something more serious. He left because she asked him to go to the theater with her. Now everything had changed, and he didn't seem to want to spend time with her like he used to. She was shocked by this decision and couldn't accept it. The maid entered the room, noticing Preya sitting on the floor, and could not understand what had happened. She was confused, trying to understand if everything was okay or if something terrible had happened to Preya. Preya handed the letter to the maid, who opened it and saw that it stated that Preya's brother had gone to war. This news shocked her, and she could not believe such a decision. The maid asked again if their father knew about this. Preya answered with alarm that in her opinion the Duke knew nothing. The maid confirmed that if he had been aware he would have reported it long ago. Preya was completely confused. Her thoughts were in a jumble, and she could not understand why her brother had left for the war so abruptly and without warning. Her father slammed his fist on the table in disappointment, but he himself did not know what to do. The Duchess tried to calm her husband, saying that this stubborn child Million might not leave as quickly as they thought. She tried to find some explanation for this unexpected decision. At that moment, the maid brought another message, an official order from the palace. The prince had sent a letter ordering Million to join the war. It was a decision that was hard to turn down. He couldn't reveal this information sooner because it concerned secret elite troops. He hoped for their understanding, explaining that the situation was urgent and could not be delayed. Time was critical. They were in complete shock. This was an order from one of the princes, and it would be impossible to bring their son back. However, they were still unsure whether everything would be fine and whether they would be able to cope with this. Now all he could do was hope for the best. He thought his son would go somewhere far away, but to find himself right on the battlefield was completely unexpected and terrifying. It was all happening too fast. He understood that this was his son, but his character was complex and unpredictable. It seemed that the time had come to take measures that could stop this thoughtless act and prevent even greater problems. The wife asked what he was talking about because she didn't know all the details. She couldn't understand why he didn't want to go with them, but her husband told her that that wasn't his intention, and the situation was much more complicated. The woman could not understand what was really going on. Her husband was silent, not knowing how to tell her that her son had gone to war to fulfill a strange assignment, to become a groom for another man's daughter. After that, he reassured her by saying that he was worried about his daughter. In fact, he was very concerned about her safety and did not know how it would all end because the situation was becoming more and more tense. The woman was surprised to see him call her Marquise again. He quickly apologized, explaining that he hadn't thought of that. Million might not get any support, so she could only hope and pray. Despite all the Duke's efforts, Million was becoming more and more successful every year, his victories becoming louder and more noticeable. The Duke could not hide his irritation, but he could not stop him either. 5 years had passed, and everyone was eagerly awaiting the final victory of the Empire's heroes. Father called Preya to him. She felt that this moment was important and had a premonition that he was about to say something serious. Her father asked her to come to him, and Preya, realizing that the conversation was important, immediately came to him. She said that she already guessed what he wanted to talk about because she had known about it for a long time. Father said that the Marquis of Rotane's eldest son had said that he liked Preya. She was a little confused, not understanding what he was talking about. He had said that she needed to go somewhere today, but she couldn't understand what he meant. Her father reported that the Marquis of Rotane's eldest son had once again declared his attraction to her, but Preya was not too concerned. It was a common occurrence and she saw no reason to worry. He said there was nothing to worry about. Preya was in complete shock. She could not believe that her father had decided to make such a proposal. She thought that he had already decided everything without her participation, and she did not understand why he was so persistent in trying to marry her off. Preya decided that perhaps it was time for her to leave the house, as she was no longer so young. But her father had a different opinion, saying that he did not agree with her decision. She replied that she had already expressed her disagreement with the marriage. Her father tried to explain that she was acting like this because Million was at war, but now she needed to step up. He insisted that she at least go somewhere, not stay in this state. Preya didn't understand why she had to rush. She felt like she could wait, even go on a blind date, and only then return to these issues after her brother returned. The father confidently said that they knew how he could handle the situation. In his opinion, a month would fly by quickly, and all issues including Preya should be resolved during that time. All that was needed was to act. He continued that if a decision about his daughter was not made soon, her brother would return, and that would be a problem. He could not even imagine what might happen if this issue was not resolved before his return. Her father suggested that if she was going to get married anyway, why not start dating? Then Million, in his opinion, would just give in. It would be a way to end her doubts. Preya couldn't understand what he was talking about and asked him again. He told her to just forget about it, but she noticed that his behavior had become strange, as if something was wrong with his words or actions. Her father told her that he might think he was weird, but he still wanted her to go on the date. He tried to explain that this would make her understand that it was important to him, although he doubted that she would agree. Preya understood. She was old enough, 26, that it would hardly surprise anyone that she should start dating. Her father was probably worried that she still hadn't found someone who was right for her. While Preya was talking to her father, Lang arrived with a letter that brought unexpected tension. He brought it with a barely perceptible expression on his face, and she was curious about what might be inside. Pre's brother continued to fight for his country despite the war and found time every day to send her a letter. She read them often, trying to figure out what he wanted to tell her and put off any talk of other men. Preya thought that even if she got married, her brother should still be the first to congratulate her. He was always there, and without his support, she could not imagine any important moment in her life. Her mood improved when she read his letters because each time she felt his closeness, he always wrote how he missed her, and this gave her strength. He thought about her every day, no matter how busy he was at the front. After reading the last letter, Preya realized that her brother was perhaps hinting at some discrepancy in their plans. He seemed to be worried about her future, although he himself may not have realized how hard it was for her to take it. He was already old and sometimes his words seemed meaningless, but Preya felt that it was all because of his concern. She understood that her brother was worried about her life, but he did not understand how difficult it was for her to accept all this. Preya thought that if she went on a date, she would have to be honest with herself and everyone around her. Her brother missed her, but she had to keep moving forward. She hoped that they would be able to meet again soon. In her last letter, Preya said that her father insisted on a blind date. She expressed gratitude for her brother's concern and support, but she still had to go to the meeting. Preya decided to write a letter back to her brother, and following her plan, began to get ready for the date. Despite her doubts, she prepared to meet the stranger who was offered to her. In the letter, she thanked her brother for taking the time to write every day. In the past, she had mentioned how her father was rushing her to get married, but now she was genuinely touched by his attention. Despite her feelings, Preya was still going to go on a date. The Marquise's eldest son said he liked her, and despite her doubts, she had to keep her promise. When Preya sent the letter to her brother, she did not know that his response to the letter would be so decisive. Milian rushed into battle, cutting off the head of the enemy king. Preya only hoped that he would return unharmed. Preya thought for a long time about the possibility that her brother might have been injured. She was worried, but the maid noticed her concern and offered to send someone to personally check on his condition. However, Preya began to realize that if she did this, she could only hinder her brother, so she decided to wait a little while until she knew more. Suddenly, a maid burst into the room, hastily addressing Milady. She looked worried, as if something important had happened, and Preya immediately sensed that it was connected with her brother. The maid asked why Tanya knocked, but the girl replied that it was not so important now. The young master would probably be home soon. Preya was completely shocked by the news. She quickly began asking when it would happen, and when the maid said in 3 days, her joy knew no bounds. Everyone around was delighted. The maid added that now Milady would not run along the corridor since her brother would soon return. Preya felt incredible relief. Without wasting any time, Preya ran to her father to tell him the good news. Her heart was pounding. She was full of impatience to tell him that her brother would soon be home. When she burst into her father's room, he looked really depressed. He said he already knew about it, and the girl was surprised that he found out so quickly. She suggested that perhaps he already knew about his brother's injury, but her father hastened to reassure her, saying that he was fine, and nothing terrible had happened. At this point, her father casually asked her how Sir Gladion was. Preya was a little confused, but replied that everything was not so bad, although she could not understand why he was asking this. However, her father seemed to already know what he wanted to hear. He said that if that was the case, then maybe she would want to marry Sir Gladion right now. Preya was shocked and did not understand what he was talking about. The father explained that once was enough. He believed that a girl should not agree to marry the first person she met. For this, you need to study and try at least 3 times to understand what's what. The father admitted that she was indeed right and apologized. The girl was a little confused, not understanding why he was behaving like that. Going downstairs, she asked if everything was okay. He said that everything was fine. The Duke insisted that the servant immediately call the Marquise. The girl was left perplexed, not understanding why her father had changed so much and started behaving strangely. She could not understand what was happening. She tried to understand what was wrong, but her father did not answer her. He remained silent and reserved, which only increased her doubts. It was difficult for her to understand the situation, but she could not ignore what was happening. Her father finally said that she had to understand her role because he was her father and her brother was Million. It didn't matter what anyone else said. That was the main thing he wanted to convey. He expected her to understand and accept it. The girl, after thinking for a moment, replied that she understood everything. However, she did not need to repeat it. The father looked embarrassed, as if he himself did not know how to correctly convey his thoughts to his daughter. He didn't know how to tell her the Marchioness claimed that the servant knew about her work and therefore saw no reason to call her. He was at a loss, not knowing how to explain everything that was happening. When Preya approached her husband, he made no secret of the fact that the situation was extremely difficult. His face was gloomy, and his words immediately made it clear that everything in their lives was not going as they had expected. The woman, looking at him irritably, said that he had forgotten their rules. They had always agreed not to interfere in each other's lives, and now this concern was beginning to irritate her more and more. The man, however, firmly replied that he remembered their rules, but there was something much more important than their agreements. That was why she asked him why he had called her if the matter was really serious. His voice became harsh as he began to shout that their daughter Preya was in danger. His eyes showed concern and fear that he could not hide despite his efforts to remain calm. She couldn't understand what was happening to her daughter. She always thought that Preya was a rebel, always striving for something more. However, her husband suddenly started blaming his son for everything, which surprised her greatly. Eventually, she found out that Preya actually liked her son. The Duchess was stunned by this revelation. It was something completely new, and she could not understand how her son could be so open about it. The man argued that they could love their sisters and that it might be better than hating them. However, the father said that it was more complicated than that and that the situation was not as she thought. Preya couldn't forget the day Million watched her drink with concern, his gaze full of worry, as if he wanted to tell her something important, but didn't know how. The Duchess said with restraint that she knew about the event. Million had given his sister a gift that he was going to give to his fiancée. She could not even imagine how he had managed to find the words to explain it. Preya was shocked. She started saying quickly that maybe he was wrong, that it wasn't like that maybe she could just forget and move on with her life. He needed to understand what their family relationships were like. The father didn't seem surprised. He started to say that it all seemed like some kind of curse. He promised that he wouldn't force her to get married anytime soon, but suddenly, as if by magic, he handed her a hairpin. Million apologized. He didn't want to keep it a secret for so long. The Duchess, feeling the heat, asked if it was all true or if he had just decided to talk to her without thinking about the consequences. He confirmed her doubts quietly, apologizing. His wife looked dejected, preoccupied with what to do next, but Million knew there was something else that might be far more important than all of this. Preya didn't understand what he could be talking about. He said he was leaving and it seemed he wasn't going to be part of their family anymore. This statement stunned her. The woman was shocked. She couldn't believe her ears. The father was saying that he was going to leave the family and marry her daughter. She started screaming, claiming that it was complete nonsense and didn't make sense. The Duchess, hearing these words, asked with horror if he really thought that they had married only for the sake of some games. There was a mixture of bewilderment and fear in her voice. The Duke, however, calmly replied that this was not so. He noticed that the rebels were growing in number and their actions were becoming more and more aggressive. Their first point in the agreement was to keep the wedding secret so as not to reveal their intentions. The terrorist attacks killed many aristocrats. Some lost their loved ones, and some were left alone suffering a terrible loss. This also affected his wife, who suffered from these attacks. She reminded him that he knew this better than anyone else. His personal tragedy was too fresh in his memory, and he could not forget the loss of a loved one. They had indeed gotten married to help him investigate his wife's death and eliminate the rebels, but honestly, she didn't think he had forgotten about his dead wife. Even though they had been on the front lines all that time, he said he understood the importance of their mission. Even if the children ever learned that the marriage was a sham, they would be able to explain that their goals were far more important than personal feelings or public opinion. The Duke was sure that this could not be allowed. If he did not know the truth, he would marry even faster. His wife did not know what to do because all the reports had already been sent to the emperor, but if they moved the base here or even worse, withdrew the troops, the consequences would be terrible. He couldn't go anywhere today, so she decided she would force her daughter to marry her brother quickly. It was the only way out. First of all, they had to stop him from meeting her, convince her that it would be better this way. Their plan was simple: tell about their feelings, and if it was true, there would be no other way but to reveal the secret of the fake wedding. They just had to wait until everything came to the surface. Then they would be able to destroy this marriage. 3 days later, the day came when everything was to be decided. But they had no plan of action, and the lady's mind began to refuse to work. She was at a loss, not knowing what to do next. The gentleman was silent for a long time, and then he turned to her and said that he had a letter with a proposal of marriage for Lady Pri. It was unexpected, but now their lives could change. When the gentleman heard about this, his joy knew no bounds. He immediately decided to act despite all the doubts and indecision that had tormented him before. Million wrote a formal letter in which he asked for the hand and heart of the daughter of this house, expressing his desire to tie his life with her in marriage. He was determined to build a future together. Million made a significant contribution to the victory over the enemies in the war, and as a reward he was given a new title of Tailors. He promised to take care of his daughter, devoting all his love and attention to her. In the letter, he insisted that his offer not be rejected. He warned that if his request was ignored, he would act persistently and personally deliver the letter to their family. The woman was completely horrified by the contents of the letter. The words written by Million stunned her, and she immediately turned to her husband, asking again where this message came from. The voice replied that the letter had come from the gentleman to whom Million had expressed his intentions. The Duke, hearing this, realized that he still needed to find his son and sort out the situation with this proposal. Preya was just about to go on a date with her fiancé. She glanced out the carriage window and noticed her parents riding away on horseback as if on an important and urgent matter. Preya didn't quite understand what was going on with her father, who had decided to continue on his journey with the maid. It was strange and confusing, and she couldn't figure out how it all connected to their lives and her future. Today was their second meeting with Sir Gladion. She felt that the situation was somewhat tense and it was oppressive. He was polite, but Preya noticed that his words sounded distant without the previous friendliness. Although Preya was not particularly enthusiastic, she did not object to the wedding. She planned to continue to run Rachel's family business because her future plans did not include becoming a mistress. On her way home, Preya unexpectedly met Maria. She was surprised to see Preya there and couldn't help but notice how she looked like she was at an important meeting. Maria, with a smile on her face, said that she had heard about the return of Preya's talented brother and had rushed to congratulate her on this event. It was joyful news, and she clearly felt that this was a special moment. Preya nodded and confirmed that it was true. It was indeed a joyful event, and she, in a little hurry, asked Maria to make way for her so that she could continue on her way. Preya also asked Maria to step aside as she had already agreed on the matter and her affairs required attention. She was a little busy and she did not want to be distracted by long conversations. Maria, with obvious interest, asked again whether Preya had heard anything important. Preya, in turn, stated that she was not going to listen to any gossip and was not interested in other people's opinions. However, Maria insisted on telling something important. She claimed that Preya needed to know about one event that could change her mind. It was a shocking news. Preya was shocked to hear that her brother had left the family. Maria said that it was true, and the information came from Gu Wu Kyung, who had just returned from the war. These words greatly upset Preya. A storm of emotions arose in her soul, and she became so angry that she could hardly restrain the desire to hit Maria for her impudence and carelessness. Preya, with anger in her voice, asked Maria if she was truly afraid of her. Maria, unable to hide her fear, answered in the negative, but Preya made it clear that she would protect her family at any cost. Preya warned that if Maria continued to spread rumors, she would personally silence her. Preya was ready to show her determination and confidence in any situation. The maid, surprised by what was happening, asked again where these strange rumors came from. The mistress was indignant, clearly dissatisfied with the situation. She could not understand who could spread such gossip about them. Preya, a little embarrassed, explained that she had come with a gift for the gentleman. She spoke with restraint so as not to raise unnecessary questions, but did not hide her excitement about the situation. Sir, a little puzzled, began to say that she should not have spent money on such a gift. He clearly did not expect such a gesture and did not want her to feel obligated. The lady, slightly irritated, interrupted him, telling him to stop talking like that. She claimed that giving it to him was important to her, and his words could not change her mind. Preya calmly added that her brother deserved love and care, despite everything. Then the gentleman, noticing her confidence, asked if her brother really had blonde hair and red eyes, as she described. Preya confirmed that it was true. The gentleman thought about it now. It became clear to him why everyone said that her brother's eyes resembled the color of blood. This was information that he could not forget. He added that apparently her brother was looking at him with a look as if he was ready to kill. His words were full of bewilderment, as he did not understand the reason for such aggression on his part. Preya was shocked. She turned around and saw her brother silently, in complete amazement. She began to ask when he had managed to return. Her surprise was genuine because she did not expect to see him so quickly. Million, with a slight smile on his face, replied that he had just arrived. He immediately smiled as if there was nothing surprising in this situation for him. He always knew how to surprise his sister with his unexpected appearance. Million, without hiding his interest, asked what his little sister was doing. He was clearly interested in how she spent her time, constantly surprised by her unusual actions. He noticed with a smile how beautifully she dressed today and was genuinely surprised by her choice. Apparently, she had always been a mystery to him, and he could not help but notice her style and the changes that were happening to her. He took the pin out of her hair, letting her long locks fall down. Preya tensed slightly in surprise, but before she could object, he did it with such ease as if he was already used to such actions. With a smile on his face, Million asked if she wanted to see him go crazy. His words were full of challenge, but there was a hint of humor in them. He loved to surprise his sister and was always on the edge of mischief. Preya, not understanding what he was talking about, pushed him away with slight irritation. She did not know how to react to his words and decided that she would not pay attention to his strange jokes. Preya couldn't figure out what it was about her behavior that had attracted the boy's attention. She just didn't see anything wrong with someone being interested in her. Million, her brother, looked at the guy and praised his actions, adding that he was quite generous in not gouging out the man's eyes for his views. It was a bit sarcastic. As they sat at the table, Preya remarked that perhaps this guy should apologize to her fiancé, as his behavior was clearly causing embarrassment. That was her take on the situation. Preya's brother had been rather rude to the boy today, not hiding his displeasure. Million thought his behavior was justified, but Preya insisted that he apologize for his behavior. Million, trying to understand why he should apologize, was perplexed. He did not feel that he had done wrong. However, the girl explained that he had literally driven the guy away with his behavior. To this, Preya's brother suggested that she should then apologize to him, since her words could be perceived as an insult. Preya did not understand what was being discussed at all. She did not think that she had done anything wrong. Preya didn't think she had done anything wrong. The guy in turn claimed that she had traded him in for a blind date, which in his opinion was also something unfavorable. Preya responded with surprise, explaining that she saw nothing wrong with sisters having romantic relationships. It was normal for her, and she couldn't understand why her behavior was causing such questions. She apologized anyway. Even though it was embarrassing, Preya couldn't put the whole picture together and didn't understand why she should apologize for simply going on a blind date. Pre's brother asked again if she understood how much it hurt him to hear about her tryst. He continued to say that he was overcome with unbearable pain that made him want to destroy everything around him. Despite the pain, Preya didn't think her brother was right. The murder was too much, but she thought his condition was due to seeing blood, which could have affected his emotions. The brother continued to speak, and noted that if she knew what had happened that day, she would understand why he felt that way. He said that he could have held on much longer if she had only known. Preya came closer and asked him if everything was really okay. Now, her voice was concerned. She wanted to make sure he wasn't hiding any important information. She tried to calm him down, deciding that he would not go crazy from her words and actions. She believed that her brother was in control and coping with his emotions. He looked fine and, as always, confidently in control of his emotions. She shouldn't worry. If he had lost control, he and the Duke would have stopped him by now. Preya looked at her brother carefully, noticing how he was following her gaze as well. He couldn't help but wonder why she was looking at him so strangely and tried to understand her feelings. After that, Preya asked him why he was looking at her like that. The brother, embarrassed, replied that he just wanted to look at her, nothing more. He didn't think it would raise questions. Preya turned away, trying to hide her feelings. She said that it was not that, and her gaze became more serious. The brother replied that he really just wanted to look at her because he was happy now. Preya didn't quite understand what he meant by that. Why did he allow himself such embarrassing phrases? She wondered if perhaps he really was used to expressing his feelings in letters. She felt confused. She didn't understand why her heart was beating so hard. The feeling was strange, and she couldn't figure out the reasons for this excitement. This anxiety didn't give her peace. Perhaps it was her brother's strange behavior that was the cause he was acting differently than usual, and she couldn't figure out what exactly had changed in his mood or his words. Looking at the situation from another angle, she realized that her brother had said something similar before. It wasn't something new, and in theory it shouldn't have surprised her so much. However, her heart still fluttered. Her brother asked her what she was going to do with this man Chove, and her reaction was one of bewilderment. She could not understand what exactly he was talking about, and decided that he was talking about Sir Gladion, with whom she had been dealing. She replied that perhaps one should be careful with one's language, as it could lead to unpredictable consequences. She was hinting that sometimes words could backfire on a person. In response to her remark, her brother began to look much more serious. His gaze became intense, and his face seemed to be overshadowed by a shadow, as if he realized something important that made him think. He thought that the girl might actually be interested in this anchovy, and noticed that she seemed agitated. This only increased his suspicions, and now he was not sure what was going on between them. She tried to calm him down by saying that she didn't think the anchovy was that bad, but her brother couldn't hide his irritation when he heard this. His reaction was harsh, and he couldn't contain his anger. Preya couldn't understand why Million became so tense every time her fiancé was mentioned. His gaze became hard, as if he were a prosecutor investigating a case of infidelity. She could feel how jealous he was. The brother confidently declared that he had to get rid of him right away. Preya didn't know what to say to that, but she felt inside that this anchovy wouldn't live a long and happy life. It was all just too weird. She couldn't understand what was going on. Million was clearly mentally unstable after the war, and although he hadn't been kind before, his behavior was now frightening. It went beyond mere irritation. Suddenly, she remembered that conversation with Maria, how she had tried to explain all these oddities and tensions between them, but now she was increasingly doubting the correctness of her decisions. She realized that she was no better. When she threatened to rip Maria's mouth apart, she was also right, but she herself was on the verge of going too far. Doubts did not leave her. She did not want to be as cruel. Then she stopped, realizing that her anger was caused by false accusations against her brother. It was something personal, something that made her feel protected, but at the same time not entirely fair. Preya couldn't understand why she had to deal with such bloodthirsty eyes now. Million looked like someone who was ready to do harm, and it scared her. She didn't know what to do about it. Doubts tormented her. She asked herself if she was wrong in her perception of the situation. Was he really her brother, or was this all just some strange nightmare that had no logical explanation? He confirmed his words, and Preya began to ask questions. She did not understand why he hated her fiancé so much. Why was he willing to go to extremes to get rid of him? He offered to show her what was behind his actions. His eyes became serious when he said that all these feelings were due to some event that she needed to understand. He was determined. He warned her that if she didn't want to face the fact that he would become a murderer, she should stop making other men happy with her smiles. He wasn't joking, and his words were full of threat. Preya couldn't believe that her brother could say that. It was unlikely that he really thought that she had feelings for other men. He was just overreacting because he was worried about her. She decided not to take his words seriously, smiled, and replied that she did not understand what he was talking about. People often perceive her behavior in their own way, and this could be the reason for his displeasure. He admitted his mistake, but looking at her face, he realized that she did not take his words as a joke. He apologized earnestly and tried to calm her down, realizing that the situation was not as simple as he thought. The girl was stunned by his words. He told her that she was the only one who didn't notice how much he liked her. It was so unexpected for her that she didn't know what to think. He always assured her that he did not consider her his sister. This phrase sounded strange and inappropriate to her because they were so close, but he said it more than once and she could not help but believe it. She thought that this confirmed her suspicions and decided to ask him what he meant. She asked him not to mock her because she almost believed him, but she still could not understand what he was talking about. The brother, without worrying, said that there was no point in denying the obvious. He convinced her that this was a fact that needed to be accepted and she should accept his words. There was not the slightest doubt in his voice. The girl was shocked. It was so unexpected that she could not contain her emotions. She stood up and started screaming, unable to calm down. It was all too much of a shock for her. At one point, when she addressed him by his formal name, she noticed him smiling. He calmly said that it was no longer his name and that her addressing him no longer mattered. This struck her as odd. He said his name was now Million Taylors. She was in complete shock when she saw the documents he showed her. These weren't just words. This was his new status, and she couldn't comprehend it. He left his family and took the title of the Descendants of the Empire. It was a real blow to her. Her brother was gone, leaving her, and she could not believe that it happened so suddenly and without warning. The girl couldn't understand how he could do it so easily. He just left their family without saying a word and declared that she was no longer his sister. It all happened so fast that she couldn't accept it as reality. The parents searched for their son, but he was not in the area or in the surrounding towns. Perhaps he had gone to the capital. In any case, he could not be allowed to meet his sister until all the details were clarified. There was some information, but all this is just rumors for now. The main task is to prevent these rumors from spreading, otherwise the consequences may be unpredictable. Preya always considered him as her brother, not suspecting that he could feel something more for her. If he decided to marry her, it would be a real shock for her. If this marriage did take place, rumors would immediately begin, since even officially they were no longer Edmores. The public would again talk about a possible union with Jean, which would only worsen the situation. A few days before the wedding, rumors began to circulate about an affair between them. Preya would have preferred that it was just a misunderstanding, and that the wedding itself would become a cover for rumors about their affair. This suited her because it was easier. However, those who spread rumors about the fake marriage were killed. The rebels continued to search for them, and if anyone drew attention, they would immediately be remembered. This is extremely dangerous and could ruin all their plans. This could not be allowed to happen. The leader, as always, had his spies in their ranks, and security measures had been tightened at the border. They had even begun sending telegrams because the situation required it, and she was at a loss, not knowing what to advise. After they looked along the road, they became curious about where Preya was and decided to ask about it. The girl was surprised by their question because she did not expect that they would look for her. She replied that she had met her fiancé Gladion, and they were very happy about this news. Her whole story made them genuinely happy for her, although she herself could not help but notice their joy. They soon noticed that Preya's face had turned red and asked if everything was okay. Preya sheepishly replied that it might be because of the heat, as she could actually feel the sun beating down on her. But then she wondered if it was just the heat that was making her blush. After all, she had been running down the street and she wasn't entirely sure if her parents knew about it. If they had, it would have probably spread quickly. Preya wasn't sure if she should meet her brother at the welcoming party. Maybe he wasn't even invited since he was becoming less frequent in their family. It all left her confused, not understanding what was going on. The girl felt tired and said she was going to rest. Her parents did not object, but they noticed that she was behaving strangely, somehow out of place. Their anxiety began to grow, but Preya could not explain it. Perhaps she heard something, but if that was the case, she would have reported it long ago. The parents could not understand what was happening to their daughter because she was clearly not in her element. They knew they needed to find their son urgently, and it became their priority. At that moment, as if by magic, Million came to them, not noticing that they might miss him. Everyone was shocked when they saw Million, who asked them how they liked the gift he brought. This unexpected appearance of their son surprised the parents. They could not even answer right away, as they were shocked. The father was stunned because Preya could not understand what gift was being talked about. It was all too unexpected and strange for her. She did not know what was really meant. Million thought that she would definitely like the gift. He was sure that this was what she was waiting for, and that the gift would be exactly what would make her happy and surprised. However, he asked her to come in and talk to him alone. This was an important point, because in their environment there was no place to discuss such a delicate topic. A private conversation was needed. Preya agreed, adding that perhaps the guy had nowhere to stay nearby, so she suggested that he could stay with them to get some rest and recuperate. The traveler would have been glad of such an offer, but he had already made a decision about a place to spend the night. His dwelling turned out to be very close, almost within reach, which was convenient for him. What she heard shocked her even more. She couldn't understand how an aristocrat who had only settled here 3 days ago had already managed to sell the place. It all seemed illogical. Preya soon realized that the aristocrat who was going to settle down was actually the same guy. This discovery stunned her, and she could not believe this coincidence. A suspicion began to grow in her mind that something was wrong here. She felt that the conversation would drag on and require a lot of explanation. Something important was hidden behind this whole situation. The expression on the guy's face made it clear that he was hiding something important. Now that the situation was becoming more open, he could finally calmly lay his cards on the table and share what he had been keeping to himself. Preya woke up early in the morning with a heavy feeling in her chest. She had just learned that Million had not gone to the welcoming banquet, even though it was an important moment for everyone who had just arrived. She was still worried about him because she had only managed to escape by pretending to be sick. Fear was taking hold of her. Perhaps her parents knew about the rumors, but they were acting so calmly as if nothing was happening. At that moment, a maid came up to her, noticing that she had gotten up early. The woman asked if everything was all right, as she seemed worried. Preya replied that she simply needed some time alone with her thoughts. Although everything didn't seem so scary, she had a strange feeling inside. She couldn't understand why she still couldn't get rid of the image of that guy. His face didn't leave her mind. Deciding that the best way to relieve her anxiety was to get busy, Preya threw herself into her work. She focused on the tasks at hand, hoping that it would help her take her mind off things and ease her mind a little. Preya decided to go to Mishar. It was a small association that united people who owned the magic of spirits. Despite its size, it was very influential, and Preya was its president, so it was not easy to get there. Recently, many people began to leave the association because rumors of its connections to the magic tower began to circulate. Although it was difficult to find evidence, rumors of spirits being kidnapped and used in experiments were very disturbing. Mishar, on the other hand, made excellent use of the information about her cooperation with the Magic Tower, because thanks to this, she received important data accelerating her development and becoming more and more influential. Thanks to this, all those who were held against their will under the pretext of protection from the Spirit Association were released. The operation went perfectly, all goals were achieved, and no one was hurt. However, when she looked at her to-do list, she was stunned. There was nothing important on it, and it seemed like the day was completely empty. She couldn't believe that she had nothing to do today. The maid immediately noticed that something was wrong with Milady. After all, today was supposed to be the grand award ceremony for Milan. She should have been present at this important event. But instead of discussing the ceremony, the lady began to scream hysterically that she would not go. She said that from that moment on, Milan had become a taboo topic of conversation, and all of this was troubling her greatly. The woman was completely shocked by this behavior. Usually ladies are proud of their brothers, always bragging about them to everyone, and it was difficult for her to understand what had happened, but she advised that they should make peace. The lady immediately wanted to say something, but at some point she fell silent, as if the words were stuck in her throat. She wondered what could have led to such behavior. The festival was incredibly beautiful. There were many people, everyone looked happy and joyful. The atmosphere was filled with festive energy, and everyone around was smiling and enjoying the moment. However, despite this, the lady did not share the general joy. Her mood was completely the opposite. She felt depressed and could not enjoy what was happening around her. The main character, Preya, already knew that once she met her brother, she would have to tell him everything she had learned. This was not just an important moment, but a decisive one for both of them. But as soon as she looked back, her expectations were met. Edmure, as she had expected, had accomplished the impossible on his own, and now deservedly bore the title that had previously seemed unattainable. Although Preya had already heard many interesting stories from the local knights, now everything seemed especially important. One of them was related to her brother, and she felt her heart beat faster. Recalling these conversations, she couldn't help but remember how she had fought Milian as a child. She had been about 10 years old then, and she hadn't even realized how much it would affect her future. The knights discussed events that seemed simply horrific to her. One of them told how his friend held the king's head, laughing, believing that His Majesty's eyes were the eyes of the god of death himself. Preya couldn't resist leaning against the beam and asked resolutely if she could listen to this scary story. Her curiosity was too strong to just leave everything as it was. They, despite their doubts, agreed to tell her, but warned that the story they were about to tell would be too terrible for the Lady Preya, only replied that she liked such stories. By saying that her crazy brother had done all this on purpose, it became clear that his return was not a coincidence. He knew that everything would turn out as he planned, and now Preya could understand it. Meanwhile, Milian stood next to his colleague at the ceremony, but couldn't shake the feeling of regret that he never saw Brian during the awards ceremony. His friend, although he shared his feelings, still thought that invading the enemy camp and such actions were somewhat strange and risky, even if it helped in achieving the goal. He was shocked when he saw Milian with the king's head in his hands. The boy, without blinking, asked if His Majesty was satisfied with the result, because that was the only way the war ended. The answer was reserved, despite the admission that the result was good, but still His Majesty envied Milian because the youth now had more power than he did. Before parting, His Majesty asked what Milian would do if his sister was in danger, but the boy did not know what to answer and only remained silent. After thinking for a moment, he said that there was no need to worry if Preya was attacked by rebels. This only confused His Majesty even more. He did not understand the meaning of such words. Milian smiled, took out the ball, and said that if anyone offended Preya even a little, he would personally find the offenders and destroy them all without exception. Even though His Majesty had known Milian for a long time, he could not remember him ever putting such effort into writing letters. It was all because of that very project. And so Comrade Milian's curiosity did not give him peace. He tried to understand what was so important hidden behind this mysterious task. But despite all his desire to meet her, Milian replied that there was no need for this, as if he had decided that meeting her was unnecessary and did not carry much meaning. He wanted to talk about the boy's nightmares, but he insisted that it was just his illness and his personal business, so there was no need to worry. It was not something that could concern others. This impressed His Majesty. He offered to contact him if the boy decided to change his mind and wanted to talk about it, but for now he was in a detached mood. He was sure that the boy would recover quickly, and despite his grave condition, he believed that everything would soon fall into place. Everyone would be healthy, and the troubles would be a thing of the past. Meanwhile, Preya was very upset. Even though she said she was ready to meet her potential groom, she did not expect him to be so strange and crazy. On the way, Preya met Sarah Gladian, who decided that he had to say goodbye for his sudden appearance. He did not want her to continue thinking about him after that. He asked the girl not to contact him again, never to look for him again, so as not to cause himself unnecessary worries. He clearly wanted to get out of her life. After that, he handed over the box and said that he was obliged to return it, even if it was strange or inappropriate. He could not leave it with her. He believed that everything had to be returned. The box contained macaroons, the sweets he had bought that day, and which were now to be part of the farewell. This was his last detail in their communication. He added that, come to think of it, he didn't really like macarons, but Preya didn't understand what he was talking about because at their first meeting he had said that he simply adored these desserts. He lowered his head and said that he no longer felt any affection for these girls. Then he warned her again that she should not get involved with him, as it could end badly for her. Preya, not understanding what was happening, grabbed his hand tightly and asked him to explain what exactly had happened. Her anxiety increased. She wanted to understand what this guy was hiding. But his reaction was quick and sharp, as if he was ready to run away at any moment. He looked at her as if her gaze could cause him trouble and immediately disappeared into the darkness. As soon as Preya tried to touch his shoulder, he sharply shouted at her not to do it. Apologizing, he rushed away, not giving her a chance to figure out what had happened. At this point, Preya began to suspect that all of this had something to do with Million. Something was happening, and her brother was somehow involved in these strange events, hiding the truth. Meanwhile, Million was sitting at dinner with his parents. They were nervous and about to confess to him that they had been hiding a lot from him. Their words weighed on the atmosphere at the table. But to his parents' surprise, Million already knew the whole truth. He was aware that his parents had married not out of love, but by arrangement to resolve their own issues. His parents, seeing his calm reaction, were stunned. They did not expect him to understand the truth so quickly. Their faces reflected confusion and surprise at his awareness. Milligan said he overheard important information at the reception on the day of the wedding. He knew about it right away before anyone else did and kept it a secret from then on. Milligan's mother admitted that for some reason she couldn't sense that something was wrong with her sister. However, Milligan noticed it from the very beginning, even though no one else did. Milligan added that the parents should be careful because their mission was secret. The information was so sensitive that even the crown prince knew nothing about it. The boy stood up and addressed them decisively. He said that he was not going to interfere with their mission if they agreed to his terms and listened to his proposal. His conditions were simple. His parents would help him take care of Preya, and he in turn would pretend that he knew nothing about what was happening so as not to ruin the plan. The parents were interested in whether the boy had received consent to go somewhere. He replied that it would happen very soon if they agreed to help him and fulfill their obligations to him. A minute later, Preya flew into the room. She demanded to know where Milligan was not hiding her anxiety. Her face expressed her determination to find her brother at any cost. The father became very agitated when he heard Pre's questions. He said that he did not know where Milligan was now because he had already left their house and disappeared without a trace, leaving everyone in the dark. He thought to himself that frankly, his wife and daughter in this house were nothing more than a cover for difficult days. The lady was not interested in anything except the latest news. A new aristocrat had settled nearby. As soon as she learned of this, her interest in this man was so great that without wasting time, she immediately ran to his house, completely absorbed in this thought. She went to the door and knocked quickly. She was met by the butler, and for a moment she thought she had entered Milligan's house but quickly realized she was mistaken. The guy tried to chat with her a little, but she responded coldly, not paying attention to his words, and immediately asked where her brother was, not wanting to discuss anything else. The butler informed her that Milligan had just arrived, but the furious girl would listen to nothing more and insisted only on knowing where her brother was. He silently pointed to the place. He didn't have time to explain to the end, because she, not wanting to listen to him, rushed to the other end of the house. In response, he only asked her to wait a little, but she was not going to waste time. At that moment, her brother was in the bathroom, and she, without thinking about anything, immediately ran to him, not paying attention to obstacles, ready to meet him at any cost. When she was almost there, the butler put his hands over her eyes so that she would not see Milligan at the moment when he was naked, but he calmly told him to leave her and not to disturb her. The butler, who had been very reserved until then, suddenly smiled, said goodbye, and headed for the exit. His behavior surprised the girl. She did not expect such a display of friendliness. The girl tried not to look at him. Her eyes stubbornly avoided his body because she was not at all prepared for such a sight. It was too strange and uncomfortable for her. He was completely naked, and the girl couldn't help but notice how fit and beautiful his body was. This embarrassed her a little since she hadn't thought about such things before. She asked him to at least throw something on, but he didn't seem to understand her shyness. He immediately asked what she was doing there because, in his opinion, she clearly came with other intentions. He told her that he was just about to leave for dinner and she had come at the perfect moment, but the girl could not understand what he was talking about. Her parents had not explained anything to her about the plans. As he approached the door, he asked her with interest if she missed him. She in turn could not understand how their communication had reached such a level. After all, it all happened so quickly and unexpectedly. Preya tried to push her brother away but accidentally touched his chest. It was not how she wanted, and she immediately felt awkward. This moment was too close for her and she felt uneasy. The touch was unexpected for Million and he seemed very agitated. Preya could not understand how he could calmly say such things when the situation was so tense and delicate. She quickly closed her eyes, feeling herself blushing and feeling ashamed. Thoughts of how strange it was to look at her naked brother came into her head, and this shame made her feel very uneasy. Million covered himself and said with a smile that he would not torment her anymore. He noticed how her face turned red as if she was about to explode and asked why she came if she did not miss him. Having recovered from the shock a little, Preya began to shout loudly at her brother. She asked him what he had done with Sir Gladion because she did not understand why everything had become so strange after their last meeting. Million replied that Preya herself had told him to keep him alive, and he had done just that. However, to be precise, he had simply turned on the ignore button, but now he was actually thinking about killing him. Preya couldn't help but wonder if all the things her brother had done in the war were true. She couldn't believe that he could discuss such things so calmly without showing any inner struggle or doubt. Million explained that they had all fought hard in the war, but Preya already knew that her brother often attacked enemies alone, regardless of the risk he took. He was pleasantly surprised that his sister was so worried about him. This genuine concern made him feel a little better, and he was happy that she still cared. Suddenly, without warning, he grabbed her hand as if it was something that went without saying. "If you care about me that much, just be there," he said confidently. Preya, noticing that the situation was about to get out of hand, immediately tried to change the subject. She didn't want this to turn into something more than she could handle. She explained that she was worried about him, but as an older sister whose job it was to take care of the younger one, there was genuine concern in her voice, but she tried to keep her distance so as not to overstep the boundaries. However, her brother didn't want to hear about it. The word sister made him feel disgusted, and he didn't want her to put herself in that position. Despite this, she still insisted that he not do anything rash. Preya warned him that if he continued to behave like this, she would be forced to start ignoring him even if he accidentally broke her leg. The sister was determined in her words. After the conversation ended, Preya couldn't hide her emotions. Tears were rolling down her cheeks, and she couldn't understand what was happening to her. Everything seemed too complicated and confusing. Soon, it was time for dinner. The whole family had not gathered together for a long time, and the atmosphere was warm and calm. It was something that everyone had not experienced for so long. Everyone was happy to see them, but Preya felt awkward. It was unusual. She hadn't seen everyone together for a long time, and something about this moment didn't fit in her head. She hoped that Million wouldn't start talking about his feelings for her in front of everyone. During dinner, her father, as if nothing had happened, asked how the guy was experiencing his free life. Million replied that he had just begun this path, and then Preya asked if his father knew about his desire to separate from the family, to live separately. The father was sure that his son was doing this for the sake of independent development, to move forward without relying on his relatives. It seemed a reasonable and quite logical step for the guy. Million agreed with his words, confirming that he was indeed trying to find his way. This also meant that the rumors about his intention to leave despite the difficulties were true. Preya realized that most likely no one knew that Million was actually hiding his feelings for her. Meanwhile, the guy offered the girl some fruits, handing them over carefully. He said it in such a soft and gentle tone that Preya couldn't help but blush. In her mind, she asked him not to draw too much attention to himself, since the situation was already awkward enough. Suddenly, Mom suggested that Pri and Milian go to a dinner party. It was unexpected, but what was even stranger was the intentions behind the proposed idea. In fact, the woman was only playing along with her son, because if Preya found out that the marriage was just a fake, all efforts would be in vain, and she would lose all trust. Her father supported her, adding that it would be wonderful if Preya would go and represent the family at the party, thereby thanking Milian for his work and support. Still, the girl could not choose another path. She was well aware that the situation was hopeless, but she still tried to come up with an excuse. She decided to say that she had business in Mishar that day, hoping for luck. But her plan didn't work. The mother had already found out everything in advance. She knew if her daughter had other things to do, and even if she had, she would still have been able to ask her brother for help. This completely ruined the girl's plans. The brother couldn't help but laugh. He knew that his sister was in a hopeless situation, and at that moment he realized that all this happened because of him. She felt him watching her confusion. The main character was worried because she couldn't share any secrets with her parents. Everything she knew could destroy their family, and this thought worried her greatly. Her heart sank with fear. In the end, she replied that she would simply accompany her brother as a dance partner. In her eyes, it seemed a simple and logical decision because she was his sister and no one could doubt their relationship. Her parents smiled and said they were proud of her decision. She felt their words lift her up, even though deep down she was far from as calm as they thought. The evening came to an end, and the heroine walked Miliganak home. It was an ordinary evening, but inside she was seething with anxiety. She knew that their world was about to change forever. The guy asked if she was going to walk him home. The girl said no, she wouldn't do that. She didn't want to create unnecessary suspicions or give him hope. She asked him if he was going to tell his parents what had happened. The guy, however, pretended not to understand what she was talking about, as if he had not heard the question. Preya blushed a little, and a little embarrassed admitted that she did not want her parents to know about her brother's feelings for her. She made it clear that she was not going to accept his love. The guy, despite her refusal, came closer and almost touched her face. He said that he was not going to give in so easily, and he did not intend to retreat despite her cold answer. He added that if she continued to act as if she was afraid, he would definitely tell their parents everything. He also asked if he should reveal everything right now. The girl flared up and, angrily addressing him by name, said, "Milligan Taylors!" She froze as if suddenly realizing that she really was Taylors now. At that moment, Preya realized that she could no longer reject him. She realized that her connection to him was no longer limited to just a family name. She had become a part of his world and his life. Now that she realized this, she realized that she no longer had any reason to reject the guy. She couldn't find any excuse to continue to keep him at a distance. Eventually, Preya agreed that there really was no reason to give up. She felt that things had changed and she couldn't go back to the way they were. The boy, gently stroking her hair, asked with a slight smile if she would like him if he were her brother. This question took her by surprise, but she felt that now everything was complicated. Although the guy knew perfectly well that the girl didn't mean it, he still leaned against her and said with a smile that she didn't need an additional reason. It was quite logical, like everything was already clear. He added that this was his gratitude for her agreeing to go with him, and this is really important to him. Like, not everyone can do this, and it is valuable to him. But despite his words, the girl was not going to accept such an excuse Milian was persistent offering if nothing else bothered her to become a couple, no matter how it sounded. Hearing this, the girl blushed deeply. She even asked him not to mock her, but the guy, laughing, said that her bright red face looked too appetizing and he would like to try its taste. He pulled her towards him but stopped when she yelled at him. Milian quickly apologized and said it was just a joke. The situation eased a bit. On the way home, he said that it would get cold at night and advised her to return to the castle so as not to freeze. He took care of her comfort in advance, which could not help but touch the girl. The girl, a little embarrassed, wished him good night and then headed home. His words continued to sound in her head, not giving her any peace to her thoughts. Already in her room with her friend, she tried to discuss everything that had happened. She still couldn't believe that she liked Million, and she didn't understand why it was so, because she had never felt that way before. A friend suggested that perhaps Preya simply didn't notice certain things, but in reality Million never showed her his true feelings and reactions. It remained hidden from her, even though she might have noticed. As a child, Preya often tried to be close to Million, and this irritated him. She told her friend how he could not hide his displeasure from the first moment they met, although she only wanted to be closer. It seemed to her friend that Preya did have some sympathy for Million, because she was always by his side and followed him everywhere like a shadow, trying to attract his attention. It was noticeable. But Preya replied that her actions were purely sisterly, that her goal was completely different. However, her friend insisted that this was only her perception of the situation, and it was important how Million himself saw it all. Preya always thought that he saw her as a sister, but in reality, Million didn't see her that way from the beginning. She thought that he didn't like the fact that Rachel's family became a part of their lives, and she was just trying to be family to him. The friend tried to calm Preya down, saying it wasn't her fault, but she admitted that she couldn't control Million's feelings. It was more complicated than it seemed at first glance, and they couldn't just ignore the situation. Discussing all this, the friend added that if Million was really sincere, then this would create huge problems for everyone. Everything in their family would soon change, and Preya did not know how to cope with it. Everything seemed confusing. And then a bright thought suddenly appeared in Preya's head. The first thing she needed to do was to reconsider her own actions. She had to look at her role in this situation and understand what she needed to do to resolve it. Preya remembered her encounter with Mr. Rothan and realized that he was a coward. Such a person should not be trusted. She asked her friend again if Million would kill the guy if the truth came out. The girl said that she mostly told the truth, but in Preya's head, everything was different. She understood that in reality she was hiding a lot. Although outwardly she tried to be honest, this prevented her from relaxing. She confessed that she was going to secretly contact wedding planners to find a strong man who wasn't afraid of Milligan. After all, she would have to be much more cunning to avoid his revenge. Preya was worried not only about Milligan but also about being captured. However, for now, she needed to focus on what he wanted so as not to ruin the plan. After thinking for a moment, the lady realized that in this case Milligan should not suspect her intentions. She trusted her friend who supported her in this decision and helped her find the right solution. Preya might have found a man and gotten married if it hadn't been for that conversation with her father. If things had gone differently, maybe her life would have turned out differently. She tried to find answers to these questions. The day of the celebration arrived and Preya chose a beautiful dress. She looked gorgeous in a dress that perfectly emphasized her grace and her hidden emotions. The day was full of expectations. Milligan, noticing her attire, said she looked beautiful. He himself was dressed in knightly attire, which made him even more attractive. But Preya felt that there was more to their relationship than that. While dancing with him, Preya wondered if he really liked her. When it all started, maybe her father didn't know anything about his intentions. This thought haunted her, making her doubt. He extended his hand and invited her to get into the carriage. Million stood next to her, smiling reservedly, as if this gesture was the most ordinary thing. Preya hesitated a little, not knowing what to answer. "Let's go in the carriage, don't be silent," the guy said with a slight smile, not hiding his interest. He was calm, as if they had known each other for many years. She nodded, but still felt the tension. Million promised that he wouldn't do anything bad to her, that she could relax. He spoke confidently, as if trying to dispel her doubts, but it only made Preya wonder what this guy was hiding. She didn't quite understand what he meant by, "for now." There was something vague in his words. He noticed her confusion and explained that he wouldn't do anything without her consent, no matter what happened. But Preya remembered the moment when he kissed her on the cheek. It was unexpected and strange. She couldn't understand how it related to his words and why she felt awkward. Million, unable to bear the silence, asked if that was why she was avoiding him. He narrowed his eyes slightly, waiting for her answer. Preya didn't know what to say because his actions were increasingly confusing her. Million, as if by inertia, asked her directly if she liked it when he kissed her. He couldn't understand why her behavior was so contradictory. Preya felt her heart beat faster. The lady replied that she could not hate him. She thought to herself that he had such a face that it was simply impossible to hate him, and it was truly disconcerting. His look, his expression, all this evoked unusual feelings. He looked at her with that slightly cocky expression and asked if he could do it again. She was confused, not understanding where he was going with this, but there was confidence in his eyes, as if he was waiting for her reaction. Preya did not immediately understand the question, and feeling unsure, she asked him again, not understanding what he was talking about. However, Milligan took this as a sign of agreement and seemed even pleased with her reaction, despite her bewilderment. This made her even more angry. She felt like the guy was clearly making fun of her. Everything he did seemed insincere to her, and she couldn't understand why he was behaving like that. Preya tried to stop him, saying that she had not given permission for anything, but he interrupted her. He said that they had already arrived, as if ignoring her words. It was so unexpected and made her feel helpless. He got out of the car first without even offering to help her, which surprised her. But then, a moment later, he turned around and extended his hand to her. She realized that now she just had to obey, no matter what she thought about it. As Preya led him into the hall, she felt that she would never be able to win this game. She already realized that her feelings and desires did not matter. All she could do was submit to his will, despite the protests inside. As they entered, their names were announced: Marquise Milligan Taylors and Preya Rachel Edmore. The moment reminded Preya once again how much her life had changed and how she had found herself in a world where she had no control. There were many gentlemen and ladies in the room. Every face was unfamiliar, but Preya noticed a familiar face among them. She felt a slight uneasiness, as if there was someone here whom she did not want to meet. It was Maria. Preya always avoided her gaze, and now she felt something inside her shrink. Maria was part of her past, part of something she was trying to forget. Suddenly, Milligan leaned toward Preya and asked why she wasn't looking at him. Her eyes flashed with irritation, but she was ready to answer, although her answer was not as simple as he might have expected. She thought that everyone would laugh at his action, that he left his family. She had warned him, but she could not even imagine that he would decide to act exactly like that. It was strange to him because he was sure she had asked him not to tell anyone about it. He hadn't expected it to come out so quickly. In the crowd, one of his subordinates noticed Milligan and happily ran up to him. He immediately began congratulating him on some achievement. Maria also came up and greeted him. Together, they congratulated Milligan, clearly expressing their respect and joy at his success. Milligan then ordered them to leave, but the subordinate happily agreed. However, as soon as he turned around, his face changed. He was very disappointed. Milligan informed him that he had been expelled from the Phoenix Knights and ordered him to stand down. This was a real shock to him. The subordinate was very surprised by this. He began to wonder why the commander had so abruptly excluded him. Perhaps it was some kind of mocking gesture. Maria screamed at him, not understanding who had taught him to greet him like that. Milligan calmly replied that he had not broken any rules. The girl could find out the reasons for the exclusion of her subordinate from her friend, who had done an excellent job, and now she had to pick it up. Preya quietly told the red-haired girl that her brother had left the family. Although it was a secret, she couldn't help but share it. Meanwhile, the young man with tears in his eyes couldn't understand what his companion was going to talk about. The subordinate, upset by the situation, began to ask the commander for clemency. He claimed that he had simply made a mistake in talking too much about him and sincerely repented. However, Milligan did not listen to him. He again, but this time firmly asked him to leave, warning that if he did not do so, the consequences would be even worse. The girl wondered why he had excluded his subordinate. After all, the truth would have come out anyway. But Milligan replied that the biggest mistake was not following orders. Meanwhile, upon arriving at the hall, His Highness Crown Prince Claude Van Eros immediately noticed them. His presence was extraordinary, and he could not contain his joy at seeing the couple. Milligan warned the girl that the Crown Prince's words should not be taken seriously. He asked her to pretend she didn't hear anything and close her eyes. But now, Preya felt that on the contrary, she wanted to pay attention to everything that was happening. This was her determination. His Majesty was happy because the moment of their meeting had finally arrived. He had been looking forward to this moment, and his joy was obvious. Preya could not help but notice his sincere excitement. Preya greeted him as expected and expressed her pleasure at meeting him. His Majesty told him that Milligan had already mentioned her name, so this acquaintance was not accidental, but long-awaited. At this point, Pre's brother reminded her not to waste time on idle chatter with him. He clearly had no idea what they could possibly be talking about and was probably uncomfortable with the situation. A minute later, he sternly ordered her not to look at him. His words were full of urgency, and Preya, although she did not agree with his demand, obeyed as always in such situations. Suddenly, His Majesty told him that he had dreamed of meeting them since childhood. He added that he had known Pre's brother Milligan since they were children and played together. Preya thought about this. After all, when they were children, Milligan often went to visit his friends. She asked if the aristocrat he often saw was his friend. The Crown Prince happily confirmed her guess. This was the same aristocrat with whom Milligan had spent a lot of time as a child. His words were full of emotion, and Preya realized that this was no coincidence. Preya realized that this was her chance. She realized that if everything worked out, she could use this opportunity because Milligan was unlikely to risk the threat of someone who looked dangerous. Preya thought she should be careful because if she and Milligan were close friends, he probably knew a lot about her. Her brother could tell a lot. So she decided to be curious and ask the Crown Prince what exactly her brother had said about her. She was curious about what he knew. At this moment, the Grand Duke approached the prince, who turned out to be the half-brother of the current emperor, Asid Noras. He was an important figure in the imperial family. The Grand Duke was the son of the second wife of the Aemon family. He was born when the previous emperor was already old. This created a large age difference between them. Due to the age difference, the Duke and the Emperor's son were almost the same age. Claude and Millian were both 23 years old, while Asid had just turned 30, which surprised Preya. Preya couldn't imagine that the boy looked so young. At first glance, he didn't give the impression of being older, but when she learned his age, she was surprised. Suddenly, the Crown Prince asked Millian to step aside. Preya was a little confused, but still said goodbye and said that she hoped to continue communicating with him. Preya asked why the guy didn't go with the team. She also asked if they had met before she was trying to figure out his past. It was a shock to the guy. The lady didn't remember him, which meant he hadn't stuck in her memory. He suggested that they go see the Fireflies together. Preya still thought that the guy was someone from the imperial family, but she could not even imagine that it was the Grand Duke himself. He apologized for his inattention. He took her hand and said his name was. After that, he introduced himself again so that Preya could remember his name exactly. He was eager to show himself. The Duke noted that Preya looked older than the last time they had seen each other. He had difficulty recognizing her, especially in the dark, which surprised both him and her. It had been 5 years since they had seen each other. Of course, this was understandable since they lived in different places, and their paths had long since diverged. Preya explained that she was lucky to be born into an aristocratic family and to have the power of spirit magic. She was happy with her background, but she knew that the Duke was not a master. Although Preya understood that the Grand Duke was not a member of the Magic Tower, she knew that the Spirit Association was created to prevent the influence of sorcerers. She did not want to meet or even talk to sorcerers, but suddenly the Duke said that not all sorcerers were interested in spirits, and he himself did not like the Magic Tower. This was a surprise to Preya. It was the first time she had ever met a sorcerer who criticized the actions of the Magic Tower. This showed her that not all sorcerers acted the same. The Duke explained that it had to do with his mother. She was one of the few who had died from a mana overdose. His family had always been involved in such cases, and rumors of her sacrifice had spread. Pre's thoughts were interrupted by 3 dots that were focused on the boy's throat. She felt tension, and her instincts urged her to be on guard. She quickly asked him to turn away and move away, but then something unexpected happened, causing her to feel a sharp change in the air and her well-being. Suddenly, everything around them began to shake, and a large pile of smoke rose up, hiding them from the outside world. The whole world around them changed dramatically. He asked her if she was okay and asked her to wait there for at least a minute without moving. Preya immediately realized that the explosion was just a trick to distract attention, and in fact the target was much more serious. The Grand Duke. Suddenly, another explosion was heard. its sounds echoing throughout the area, causing everyone to become wary and prepare for the worst.